We're back, and
Indeed.
I have found someone who's been hanging out apparently in the underhives of Necromunda.
Oh, yes.
And it's time to talk about the Thousand Sons 10th edition Codex. Uh, we'll get right to it. But the funny thing here is that we haven't talked in a long time, Mike. I mean, it's been a while since we've talked 40K. So I think what's going to be fun about this is that you're probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're probably going to be looking at this a little bit more from the, hey, does this look fun to play from the
Yeah.
outside? And, like I'm going to be looking at this a little bit more from the competitive side of things. Like, how serious can we take these rules?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I haven't gone to any competitive events in at least a couple years, but I still help out with like the beginner leagues at the store that I play at and got my games in that way.
Yeah. So you're not a stranger to this stuff. It's, you
Nah.
know, so I mean, obviously these leaks have been out for probably quite a few days now. It's the weekend of the release. I hope that everybody who wanted to get a copy of the limited edition codex and a copy or a box of the Hex Flame, so you can get those new robots. I hope everybody who wanted to was able to yesterday because it was a mad dash and things sold out very fast. I want to say that it was probably about 10 minutes or 20 minutes is about the max we had on everything, which I guess on one side is good and that there's a healthy demand for Thousand Suns, but on the flip side, it's a struggle for folks who might have been waiting for it. And I think there were also some website issues that Games Workshop was having where the shopping cart for some people was not loading and items weren't loading and yeah, that all that mayhem and anything. So, anyways, I hope everybody who wanted to get their stuff got it. So again, these leaks have been out for a while. These are not actual like rumors or anything. We're literally looking at photos of the book. Some of these you might already be familiar with. We're probably going to step through this in a way that if you aren't, that just makes it so folks can follow along. So, um, first things first, we're going to start with the army rule. There are already a lot of questions out there about how certain mechanics work. We don't have the answers. There's a lot of folks out there that claim to have their interpretation and have the answers. I think the reality is until GW comes out and actually writes their day one FAQ, or a couple weeks after the release, they write the FAQ. We're not going to know. And right away, the Army rule has one of them. So we'll step through this. I'll word it the way I kind of interpret and understand this, and then we'll go from there. So before, it used to be that your army was comprised of a bunch of sorcerers. They generated a bunch of points, and then you could spend those points towards Cabal rituals, and you would get some result. And in the conversion from going from ninth, where we had a psychic phase, to 10th, where we don't have a psychic phase, the failure for perils of the warp or the failure for things going wrong was sort of baked into a lot of the rules. Where, for instance, Doombolt, your failure was, well, you'd get D3 mortals on your, like you spend your 9, 7 points or whatever it was. You'd get D3 mortals as your floor. Well, now that's not the case. So now what you have to do is you have to say, okay, you have four powers to choose from. We'll use Doombolt as an example here. And you'll pick a psyker in your army and you will say, okay, I'm going to roll 2d6 to try and cast Doombolt. So you need to roll a 7 or greater on Doombolt or on 2d6. If you do, then your result then determines what you get on Doombolt. So if you roll a what is it? It's anything under 11. So if you roll a 10 on 2d6, you're just getting D3 mortals. That's it. Um, if you roll a 11 plus, then you're getting D3 plus mortals, but D3 plus 3 mortals. So it is a wholesale reduction in the total ceiling of what could be done, because previously your top end on Doombolt was 6 plus D3, and then your middle range was D3 plus 3, and then you had a low range of just D3. So it's kind of now just resided or moved everything down a step in terms of the total output there. So let's say you roll that 2d6 and you say, okay, it's a 10. If I roll that third d6, I'm obviously going to get an 11 and I can now make that a lot more. So in a lot of cases, you'll probably say, yeah, I'm going to roll that third d6 now. And you're going to channel the warp. And then that's going to get added to the result of the 2d6 that you had. But if you produce any doubles or triples as part of that, you are now going to take D3 mortals as perils of the warp. So it definitely feels a lot more psychic-y. It feels a lot more like they're kind of trying to bring the psychic phase back. Mike, you probably, my guess is like that.
Yeah, I think that the Cabal points thing, while being very powerful, um, didn't feel like a proper psychic phase to me. The other thing, I guess, just talking about this new system versus the old system, is the old system didn't work very well at low points values. So, like for instance, if you're playing combat patrol, uh, you might be able to get off one of the weaker powers under the old system, but that's about it. Whereas
Yeah.
this, the higher level powers are accessible to you even at lower tier games. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to balance here. Because under the old system, you could actually sort of game your list, quote unquote, to have so many cabal points that it didn't even matter. Like what happens? Just I'm going to spam Doom Bolt and these things, and that's my
Right.
primary damage dealer. Whereas this is more of a bolt on to it augments your army, but it's not like the only thing your army does now because
Yeah.
you're still limited to even 2,000 points to the four, or with one of the detachments five powers that you have per turn.
It also kind of smooths the game out a little bit because even at 2,000 point games, you would get towards the end of the game and you'd have lots of games where, okay, now I don't have enough points to even cast Doombolt anymore or to Temporal
Right.
Surge, right? And so I think it kind of now still keeps you, it kind of brings down the ceiling a little bit to give you a little bit more of an even keel result through the game so that towards the end you're still as your psychic stuff is still as potent, just
Right.
because, a bunch of your psychers around them are dead. Um,
Hmm.
the controversy right now on this is it's tough to come to a conclusion looking at the rules here, and how you interpret the sequence in that diagram can be fairly interpreted two different ways. One is the way I explained it, where you first roll your 2d6, then you get an optional chance to roll that third d6, and if you roll that third d6, then you are opening yourself up to taking mortals. The alternative to that is you roll your 2d6, and even if you don't take that third d6, that's the optional part. But the second part is you take mortals on doubles, even if you roll the 2d6. So if that's the case, then you would never not want to roll 3d6, which is where I think my interpretation falls back to you're always going to roll 2d6 first, see what the result is. And if you're close, then you're going to go for that third d6. But if you're way off and there's no mathematical chance, you keep it on the low end, you don't risk perils, and then you go from there.
Yeah, their little diagram here isn't very clear. Having heard the way that you think it works, I understand where you're coming from. My read on it was you roll either 2d6 or 3d6, and the mortal wounds thing happens regardless of whether you roll two or three.
So you do it
But
all at once. Like you either
that,
choose you're going to do
yeah,
two or you're going to do three. You don't get to see the first 2d6 first and then choose
yeah,
that third one, right?
that's my read on it. But
That's fair.
I could see both ways given how they sort of divided up the two sections there.
Yep.
Honestly, I would assume that Games Workshop is going to have to FAQ that to
Yeah.
provide a clear answer.
So it's going to make it a little rough at first, I think, for folks trying to play the army. Because you're that's going to be the first thing is how are we how are we actually playing this? And everybody's going to have their own interpretation. So everybody's going to get different games out of it. And until they
Yeah,
rule on it, we're just going to be kind of doing our best there. Um, I will say the good thing is before the powers now all the powers have a 24-inch range on them, which is great. Before you had to basically bring Mutalists because they would
yeah,
double the range of the powers. And so then your Doom bolts essentially would need that extra range essentially. You can't get your 36-inch Doom bolts anymore, which sucks, but 24 is workable. I think I have no problem with the ranges that they put in here.
I think reading ahead, there is actually some. Well, one of these
I think you can
detachments
get to
gives an
30.
extra 30.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll get to that. But just as a baseline, like if I'm just
yeah,
looking at this as like I'm not taking any enhancements, 24 I can work with. So I don't feel like I'm in a
yeah,
position where I have to make this work. I don't have to go take an enhancement to
yeah. I
to
mean,
actually be able to use it.
plus, historically, most of our powers are 20. Well, most of our attack, like shooting attacks, are about 24-inch ranges, anyways. So, because these happen in the shooting phase,
You might as
it's
well. Yeah.
might as it
So
makes sense.
so now you just basically you gauge everything for whether you can attack it or not at 24 more or less.
Right.
I will say that there's a couple downsides here. So first of all, I like Destiny's Ruin. I like giving Thousand Suns Oath of Moment. I think that's a very good Marine tie-in to have something like that. How they tied it in is great. I think it's a great
Yeah.
addition to the powers, and to lose the stratagem manipulation, maybe we're losing a little fluff there with the fact that they should be the strategic legion, I guess, where they can see fate and be able to manipulate fate that way. But you know what? I'm okay with this trade out. I think it's great. It's a little bit of a different flavor to it. Um, I wish the threshold wasn't quite as much, a 10 plus to get reroll everything. Maybe that needs to come down a little bit.
Yeah, but I
Um,
mean, reroll ones is already very potent on Thousand Suns. I mean, we're hitting on threes
yeah,
for the most part. Um, I mean, getting the 10 plus, it's nice, but the fact that it affects Destiny's Ruin affects every unit in your army that shoots that target is
that's also good. So
that's
now you're
awesome.
tying in the non-psychers into the army a little
Right.
bit more. And that was,
Exactly.
again, that was another thing I don't think we touched on was that one of the design flaws in the index was that you basically were first pigeonholed into taking psychers for your points. Second, that meant any unit you took that didn't generate cabal powers or didn't interact with the armor rule in some way was hurting you basically. So even though you wanted to take
Yeah.
a land raider or like predators or things, they actually hurt you to bring them because they took away from your ability to use your cabals.
Right.
Um, Temporal Surge,
But
I think, has taken the biggest nerf here because now it requires line of sight. So it's got this little blurb in here. You have to be visible to the manifesting model. Before that was not the case. And that to me is a really big thing because it means now in order to double move another unit, you now are risking exposing another unit to cast that potentially. Where if you moved a unit up, you wanted to doom bolt and then you wanted to move them back essentially. That was a strategy we used to be able to do. Now I think that's maybe not as great because that second unit is now going to be exposed because they have to be visible to that unit,
yeah.
which hurts. And it's also not as far. It's not a full normal move like they used to be able to do. And I think that's probably my one of my bigger gripes is the upper end should probably be like a full normal move if you're going to require 10 plus on this. That's a hard result to get to, even with 3d6. I'm sure we can run stats on that, but it's
Well,
not the
so
easiest thing in the world to achieve.
3d6 gives you a slightly better than 50% chance to get a 10. Um,
But you
I
risk
mean,
the mortals, right?
yeah, you're still risking mortals there.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, my take would be this is maybe a little too weak. It's a little over nerfed. Maybe the results on the tables play out differently, but I feel like the bottom should be a move of D6 and the top should be a normal move, and it shouldn't be capped.
So,
Or maybe
I
it should be
mean,
like 9 inches or something like that.
I think the main thing here, most of our, so rubrics move six. I think
Yep.
Terminators move five.
Yep.
Um, but I think the big thing here is they don't want vehicles just deciding that, okay, I'm going to move an extra 10 inches or something,
Or Magnus,
or
right? So
Magnus.
Magnus
And,
gets to move
right.
30 inches across the board in a turn.
So,
Okay. All
yeah.
right. I mean, that's
So
a fair point.
it is a nerf for fast moving units, but for the infantry units, it's not this. It's the same or better on the high end.
Yeah.
Obviously, the D6 is always kind of undesirable, but that's
Yep.
just. I feel like the low end result ones for these are like consolation prizes for not getting the full effect. Um, Honestly,
Yeah.
if I'm playing Thousand Suns, I'm just rolling 3d6 all the time because
Yeah, because the bottom ones are kind of like okay, like you said, reroll ones are okay, right? It's not a
yeah,
it's they're kind of like they are abilities that are like you can't just say okay, they're nothing, but they're like a half step above that, I guess, where it's
yeah,
kind of like yeah,
you're still getting
rerolling ones is
something, but
okay.
it's
Yeah.
not what you want.
We talked a little bit about Doombolt, Twist of Fate.
Yeah,
That I think Twist of Fate is probably the best thing here in the fact that it pretty much remains close to how it was in the index, where now you get one AP at a minimum on something, which we'll get to the fact that bolters and a lot of other stuff have increased AP now. This starts to get kind of scary now, what you can actually accomplish from an AP standpoint on some of this stuff.
yeah. I mean, honestly, if uh, I'm looking at like Thousand Suns and just the things you can do with them now, putting Destiny's Ruin and Twist of Fate on the same target is just okay. That's dead. Like because I mean, you're getting reroll hits plus two AP. It's just a really potent mix.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they still remain an army that can basically burn down one unit very, very effectively.
Yeah.
Even if you take like a knight, that's kind of the I think like a giant knight Castellan or a knight tyrant are probably the
Hmm.
things that people look at as like the gold standard for if you can kill one of these in a turn, then you've got kind of like you've got a solid set of rules there that let you bring that down. Um, and I feel like what I'm seeing here is enough to do that when you think about the fact that there are changes coming up in some of the data sheets, but they are not like wholesale huge departures from what they are today. So there's a little bit of yeah, you could work with this. But I think all in all,
Yeah.
my summary is that I think the Army rules floor is lower than it was, and the ceiling is also lower. So the whole Army rule in general has been just taking down a notch. And where we sit
Sure.
right now, I recognize the fact that the rule will be able to work through the game, through the entirety of the game. So you're not out of it at the very end. But I think competitively, I look at it as there's a major difference between knowing what you can get, a known quantity, and something that is not a known quantity, that this could fail. And even if I roll 3d6, this could fail. And there's no re-rolling on these, right? So it's pretty
Right.
much what you roll is what you're getting. There's no, hey, I get another chance to get myself out of it. It's you either get it or you don't, and that's that.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we can get into some of the detachments now. Uh First off is Grand Coven. It's pretty much the index detachment. They swapped out the lethal power for the ability to get an additional 6 inch to the range weapons or psychic weapons. Sorry, I think that's an improvement because nobody was using lethal in general. You just never were using the lethal component, and the reason being was the fact that sustained or devastating wounds would mathematically be equal to or better than lethal in every situation. So it was kind of a useless option that was in there. But now you still get the ability to have dev wounds, which I thought was the biggest of all of them. I can live with losing sustained and trading that out for +1 to wound, which is also very good in my opinion. But the dev having the ability to get the dev wounds on all your psychic attacks is really, really big, especially when the wombo combo of your 10 Scarab Occult Terminators with their bolters turn their bolters into psychic bolters, and that stratagem still exists where now you do that and you get to reroll hits and wounds with that as well. And you make them devastating. So that whole combo is still there. Um, Mike, I don't know what's your take on what they did with the core detachment here.
I mean, So though there is the limitation of you can only use each of these abilities once per battle.
Yep.
But like so, imbued manifestation is really good as your turn one or two power because you're still that gives you enough extra range you might be able to get some early damage in. And then let's say you've got Psychic Maelstrom, you put target your a knight, for instance, give it the extra AP2 on weapons plus
Hmm.
Destiny's Ruin. You've got a big damage turn there. And then obviously, I mean, devastating wounds are devastating wounds. It's just
Yep.
nothing to sneeze at. So effectively, you've got two big damage turns for your mid game and one early game power.
Yeah.
That's a fairly good balance there. I do agree. Lethal hits is kind of was always the odd duck out there because it's just not as useful as the other two
Yeah.
powers.
Yep. Like you were alluding to, we've got the additional 6 inches to the range for powers as one of the enhancements. Another one for the Exalted Sorcerers lets you cast Doombolt twice. Umbralific Crystal basically it still exists, still an incredibly good enhancement. I would
Yeah,
argue probably the best enhancement in the entire codex, simply because of the fact that it's in your command phase, meaning you get to see what your missions are, and then you get to then decide, oh, do they go up or do they go down? There's very, very few other rules that other armies have in the game that let them do that. It's kind of having the foresight to be able to do it. It's kind of like at the end of your opponent's turn, you get to then pick stuff up, but you don't know what you're going to have for secondary. So that might be good. It might not be good. You're kind of rolling
yeah,
the dice there. And then obviously, the Arcane Vortex is now the Eldritch Vortex. It's pretty much unchanged from what it was, which means because we'll get to the Infernal Master of Doom with his insane Overwatch of Doom. Basically, it lives on. It's still is a thing. So, um, honestly, I think the detachment here, I would call this a side grade. I don't think anything has really been taken away that's too bad that it used to do. If anything, I'd be convinced in some cases that this is maybe a little bit stronger. Having two solid damage rounds, I think is really good. There's only 5 rounds in the game, and if you think about it, in my games competitively over the last 2 years, the first 2 rounds were pretty much just staging rounds for Thousand Suns. You were not going ham early. You were being protective and letting your opponent try to make a mistake and overexpose themselves, and then capitalizing on it and getting to determine what gets traded out after that. Uh, Now I feel like, look, even though you're only getting one of these, you're getting one of them once a turn. As we'll see, there is a stratagem down here that does let you uh, get a second one essentially, or put one into a different mode. Kind of like with
yeah.
doctrines, how in Space Marines you can kind of put a unit into a different mode. So that option still exists for, like, say, I think Magnus can use it because I think it's just um, yeah, it's just a Thousand Sun Psyker, so you could use Magnus. So I think in general, Magnus is very, very good in this detachment still. The fact that you have the stratagem still to blink damage, you still have the 4-up for psychic attacks, which is really, you only really see that in the mirror matches, but it's very, very important to use. Um, Sticky objectives, I think, is it's okay. There's some times when that would make a lot of sense, but it's probably later in the game rather than early in the game.
Yeah.
But and you get one for re-rolling the channel dice. However, what's interesting about this strat is it requires you to channel the warp, meaning you have to roll all three d6. So you can re-roll all of the dice, but you have to channel the warp to do that, meaning you have to take that third d6. And then, yeah, we talked about they rolled in the range extension and the reroll hits and wounds into one, and then I think there was still the, maybe I'm missing it.
Which one?
I feel like, oh, you know what? I was wrong. So, so the Wombo combo doesn't exist anymore. Because it appears to be that there is no way to make the bolters psychic with the Terminators anymore. I was under the impression that that still exists. It looks like it does not anymore. Because before, what you would do is you would, and they combine this, yeah, so it's 2 CP now because they combine two stratagems into one, so you're getting two effects essentially for one. But it used to be that you'd spend 1 CP on your Terminators to make their bolter psychic, and then 1 CP to reroll hits and wounds with them with the other one. But the fact that their Infernal Bolters are not psychic means you do not get to do that. So that does not exist anymore. So you are basically in the realm of having to do it the hard way, more or less. Maybe not so bad at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Maybe that's okay. Maybe not. I don't know, but I was wrong in assuming that that was in here. It looks like it is not. So,
yeah.
mm.
I think, I mean, just looking at the this one, it does seem very, it's very obviously supposed to represent your, like, you have a ton of psychers as your heavy lifters. And so I think it makes a certain amount of sense that they would sort of strip out the extra ability that you'd have for your Terminators, especially now that I think that a different detachment has upgrades for your rubrics and your Terminators.
I
Um,
personally see you using this on Magnus, this
oh,
2 CP. You use it
100%.
on Magnus all day long.
Yeah, save like egotistical power and devastating sorcery are definitely they get the most out of putting them on Magnus.
Yeah,
I mean, Destined by Fate obviously is a great. You're going to be using that on him almost every turn because what do people shoot last cannons at or
Magnus.
the equivalent?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, this is obviously. I mean, they put his picture on the title bar for the detachment. This is very obviously
Good
Magnus's
catch. Yeah,
detachment.
good catch. Yep. That is it seems to be you center your army around Magnus, you use the stratagems to really make Magnus go ham, and then you go from there. I think this also, the fact that this is now 2 CP underlines one of the problems that I see across the board in the codex is that there's no CP regeneration. There's no solid way for you to generate additional command points. Most
Yeah.
armies that are very CP heavy have that. And
Hmm.
I think that's going to really be the biggest thing that holds this back. Because the only other way you really do that, if you're using the Pariah Nexus or the standard mission set deck cards that we use, is discarding a mission. And if you're discarding a secondary, sorry, you're not scoring it. And that's in some ways that's not good. You shouldn't be relying on that.
Yeah.
Even though you could look at your list and say, well, I'll just discard one each turn or something like that. Well, that's not always going to be there, which means you have to plan ahead. You're only getting one, 2 CP per battle round. So that means if you hold back a turn, you're getting 2 CP, and then in your next turn, now you have three. Ideally you're good to go for that next turn with an extra one in the bag, but it's not like every single turn you're going to be able to do that. You're going to have to hold back a little bit. Otherwise, you're not going to have the CP you need for damage reduction. You're not going to be able to use any of the other strats. So I think this being 2 CP holds this detachment back, I think, a little bit. So it's kind of like you have to really pick your time, pick your battles, and go all in and hope that everything works out. Because if you flub, I mean, the game's over basically.
Yeah.
All right. Changehost is the demon detachment. This is the one I had the most hope for, Mike. And
This
I
detachment is interesting. Uh,
it's goofy. It's really goofy. I don't know how else
yeah.
to put it.
So
It's like
the big thing about
go for it.
this detachment is that this is your combined Tzeentch Demon plus Thousand Suns detachment. And the entire thing is you want your Thousand Suns to hold hands with a demon unit at all times in order to get the most out of your two different units. And if you can do that in a way that is actually like works for the army. I think this actually has a lot of potential, but there's nothing really stopping your opponent from just, let's say, well, I'm just going to blow up every pink ore unit on the table turn one,
Yeah.
and now half of your stuff doesn't work.
Yep. Yep.
But
I think I think the biggest oversight I see here, maybe it isn't an oversight, but the oversight I see is that the intent of this detachment is to make it so that you can bring 1,000 up to 1,000 points of demons, and you use a unified rule set of you can use your Thousand Suns rules with your demons and just play
yeah,
them as one unified army. The problem is, while you can cast Cabal rules, if you look at each of these, they are all locked to, except for Doombolt, they are all locked to Thousand Suns units benefiting.
right.
So unfortunately, your demons, while they can cast these powers, your real benefit is only going to be seen from Thousand Suns units that actually then go use that. I think that's a problem, in my opinion. I think that needs to be. I if I was rewording this, what I would do is I would say instead of a Thousand Suns unit, it should be a Cabal's unit. Or if I skip ahead here, I just want to double check the keyword. I got to go down to Magnus here. So it is. I guess maybe they don't have it now. Maybe it's Zinch. I don't know. They have to make it so that the demons can benefit from that. Meaning, when you get to, I'm just trying to get back to where we were. So, when you actually cast something with your demon unit, you can reroll ones to hit with them, or you can reroll all hits with them and make them act as one unified army. I don't think I see a huge
Yeah, I think
power
that
issue with that.
that I'm honestly kind of surprised that that isn't the way that they worded it here. Um, I do see that, well, with the enhancements, it almost makes up for it because each of the enhancements is itself very powerful. Um, Sort of out beyond what I would expect from an enhancement
Mm-hmm.
for some of these.
And
But yeah, it's
It's only Psyker units that get the 4-up invuln too. So it's
yeah,
not like your Mutalisks. They thought ahead of this. Like you're not going to give your Mutalisks a 4-up invuln, your
no,
Defilers, your Forge Fiends, things like that. That would be kind of cool, but yeah, I get it. They're not going to do that. On the flip
let me
side,
check
like you're
something.
restricting when we get later in the book, you'll see that the demons are restricted to a set of demons. So things like the changeling, blue scribes. I think there's some other stuff like chariots and I forget what else. There's some things. What is it? The big spider guy. Oh, I forget his name.
The
But
Defiler?
yeah, the demon equivalent, the soul grinder.
Oh, the
That's
Soul
what I was
Grinder.
thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the soul grinder you obviously can't take. Look, they've restricted the units that can come over into Thousand Suns or that play with Thousand Suns. So you're restricting what can actually benefit from that. That's your power control on this detachment, which is where I kind of feel like open it up, make it so that the Cabal rituals should work with them. Otherwise, this I I don't want to say dead in the water. I think someone could pick this detachment up and have a lot of fun with it. I think you could go on the
yeah,
table, have your demons, you could have fun. They all get to cast. You could run a bunch. I mean, honestly, the first thing I was thinking about, Mike, was Flying Circus. Like I
right.
was thinking Kairos Magnus, a bunch of Screamers, a bunch of Zangor Enlightened, and just, zoom around the table and have a lot of fun. And I think that less is really, really, really close to being viable as something that you could not only play to have fun, but also have something that's you could take to a tournament and also have fun and win games. Uh, but I don't, I just think it's held back right now by that restriction.
Yeah, I mean the uh, the limitation on the willpower is definitely a little bit of a downside here. But I mean, maybe they'll fix it. Maybe they won't. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But I like I said, like I mentioned earlier, I like the enhancements for this detachment. So the Nether Shriek Mind Eater, put that in the
Oh,
Overlord
that's
Kings, is
great.
effectively a second like ritual that you're getting for free every turn, as long as you're, playing aggressive with the Lord of Change. I mean, +1 to casting powers while within 6 inches of a scintillating legions. That's solid in the context of this
Yep.
particular list.
Yep.
Uh, what was this one? Oh, the duplicitous malediction. That is easily one of the better like abilities to have. Literally just, well, we deployed. I don't like how I deployed. Let me just fix that. And
Yeah.
soundly, you get to counter deploy 3 of your units. That's always been a game changer of an ability. I mean, as long as I've been playing, the ability to do that has always been very valuable.
Yep.
And then the Tome of True Names is funny. I don't know that it's gonna be a take this every time, but had the ability to walk something up the middle of the table and okay, guys, shoot me, and you have a 2-up influence save for the entirety of a phase. That's solid.
I mean, honestly, put this on a Scarab Cult or Terminator, or put
Yeah,
on a Terminator sorcerer in a unit of Scarab Cult Terminators, and just go, all right.
knock yourself out.
Although it's only for the bearer,
Yeah, so you'd want to put it
so
on like a something.
and
Uh,
it's only infantry, right?
yeah,
All right, maybe it's not as good as good as I
no.
was thinking, but
It, there's some, like I said, there's some use case for it,
yeah.
but it's not the type of thing. It's not as good as the other three, but the other three more than make up for this sort of lame duck of a enhancement.
I think of it as like something you put on like an exalted sorcerer on disc that you're zooming out there.
But
You got to
he's not infantry if he's on a disc.
well, we'll get to that. They actually, some
Oh,
of
did
them
they fix it?
retain their infantry rule.
Oh wow,
Yeah. Yeah. So in that case, you might be able to do that. And, you zoom them out there, expose them, and then you go, here's my 2-up invuln. I'm a Dark Elder Archon now. Good luck. So,
yeah,
yeah, for a turn.
all
So,
right.
yeah, stratagems in here. I honestly thought the stratagems for the demons were really, really good. Um, it's a lot of defensive stuff. And if you think about it, I mean, Mike, what are the armies that Thousand Sons hate to face?
I mean, anything that either outranges us or anything that's in close combat. There's always
Or
sort of a
really
kind of
fast, like
yeah,
custody
hmm
bikes, blood angels,
yeah,
things like that. Yeah. So if when you're reading through this, it's like every tool that they're giving you in here is speaking towards like, hey, you know that army you hate? Well, here's this tool to deal with it. So
yeah,
stuff like, oh, you hate stuff being outranged. Well, okay, everything is -1 to hit. Now you could just take a demon prince, but I'll tell you the value in here is the fact that there are armies that will be hitting on twos with +1 to hit, and they'll just say, I don't care about your stealth. Well, now you do, because now if I stack two -1 to hits in those situations, I just need a stratagem to do it. Now you actually are -1 to hit, and I get around that a little bit.
yeah.
Not
And
saying that's a
fractal,
common situation, but that does
yeah,
come up.
yeah, and then fractal disjunction is just very good. It's like okay, well, I'm gonna put some like cheap horror unit on this objective in the backfield. Now you have to either deep strike something right next to it or fight your way through my entire army to take that objective.
Yep.
Um, this excellent, excellent value.
Yep, exactly. Now, I think what'll happen with this is that in most games, opponents will know you have that stratagem in your back pocket. And what they'll do is they'll say, okay, I have to be within 18 inches. Okay, so they'll move their stuff within 18 inches to take that unit out, is essentially what they're going to do.
Sure, but
It's
they
still
have to,
valuable.
yeah,
It's still
they,
very valuable.
yeah, and they have to do it effectively. They have to get within 18 inches effectively ahead of time. And I don't know. I've played enough 40K to know that only like the top level of people will have the forethought to think, okay, I need to get within 18 inches of that unit, otherwise he's just gonna
Yeah,
spend a CP to make so I can't shoot at them.
right.
And it's done after they're chosen as a target. So
You
potentially
can,
they're
yeah,
wasting their shots. on the unit because the order of operations there.
But I think you can also use it to your advantage where you can take something that they do want to shoot that
Mhm.
you put at a point where they won't be able to get to it. And if they'll attempt to do it, you put the 18-inch bubble on that and make them shoot something else, right? So you make them
Yeah,
shoot like a Lord of Change or something else.
yeah,
Yeah. So the other stratagems in here, honestly, deceptive glamour is probably one of the best ones. I just don't think it's going to the situation that you'd want to use it is going to come up. So it's basically you get your let's say a unit of rubric marines in close combat, and you have a unit of blue horrors sitting right next to you. You heroically intervene the blue horrors in, and then you have to deceptive glamour the thousand or the rubric marine unit, and what that does is it then takes whatever was attacking you in close combat has to attack the blue horse. They would not be able to attack your rubric marines. On its face, in my opinion, it's a very well thought out concept, but the execution on this is horrible. It should not be 2 CP because you're
yeah,
going to have to use heroic to pull this off, which means net it's going to cost you 3 CP to pull that strategy off.
yeah.
Good
The only
players, in my opinion, know how to charge and they know how to position their units so that in this, it basically says if they're eligible to target the demons, then they have to. Otherwise, they can still target your rubric marines. So they just position themselves in a way where everything just targets your rubric marines.
Yeah, the other so there I do have a another use case for this. So let's say you're playing versus an army that has lots of always fights first, and you're using um your well, I'm blanking Terminators to you want to charge into them. Well, you're going to take damage before you get to swing if you charge in. So you charge in a unit of demons and your Terminators. You use this, they have to go after the demons first. So that means you have your full unit of Terminators to apply damage and have effectively protect them for later turns.
It could essentially shut down something like a fight first.
Yeah,
Like if
yeah,
if you're going to
that's
charge a unit that fights first or something like that, that is a really good counter to fight first right there. It
yeah.
just, in my opinion, shouldn't cost 2 CP. Probably
I
one is
do agree 2 CP is pretty bad um
and
for what
again
it does
in a
because
codex where we have no CP generation, right? It's like
yeah,
2 CP is like I've waited 2 turns or I've waited a turn to use this.
yeah.
Yeah.
But Chronos
Um,
Sorceress Bleed, solid. It -2 to charge rolls.
what is it? What was
Uh,
the stratagem in Custodes? What was it? Haywire mines or tripwire mines or whatever it was, or something
yeah,
like that. Tripwire,
something.
something like
Yeah,
that. That's really all it is. It's just something charges you. You go, nope, -2 to your charge.
it's
And
solid. I have no real complaints with it.
very good stratagem, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And again, that just speaks to you don't want to be playing armies that are your bane, more or less. Like, oh,
yeah,
that army wants to advance and charge across the table. Well, now you're just adding 2 inches to their charge, which is great.
yeah. Ethereal. What's this thing called? Uh,
Phantasm.
Phantasm
Yeah.
is literally just the um one ritual, temporal surge, just for a CP instead of
A
doing the
reactive
ritual.
move. Yeah. Which
Yeah,
is good because we don't really have many reactive moves. I think Zangor Enlightened still one of the units I think still retains the reactive move, the bow enlightened, but um it's just not a thing that really surprisingly doesn't exist that much in the army.
yeah, but very solid.
Yep.
Effectively, you just get oh no, the unit of uh, well, World Eater, really any bad thing we don't want to get charged by.
Run
I'm just
away.
gonna pick up my stuff and skedaddle 6 inches away. So
Yep.
we're not having that.
Yep. And then
And
finally the last stratagem lets you basically just take you can take up to 2 demons as long as they're not monsters or one monster, and put them into reserve.
yeah,
And that's
very solid policy. A reusable umbrelithic crystal in a lot of ways.
this is in my opinion probably the strongest stratagem in this detachment.
Yeah,
just because of the value on mobility and that, okay, my really good chess piece is on this side of the table. Now he's on this side of the table the next turn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. All right. The Zangor detachment.
Man,
Here we go.
man. Oh
Honestly,
God.
Mike, I'm sorry, but this might be the best detachment in the Codex at the moment. Um, Basically, your Zangor units can, or your mutants, okay? So mutants now, we'll get to the detachments, but mutants now include Chaos Spawns, Mutaliths, Zangors, your Zangor Shaman. Those are your mutants in the army. So what you get to do with any of those units, if you are being attacked, you can just decide, okay, I'm going to take D3 mortal wounds, and you are now -1 to wound me. Very good. Uh, you can then also, if you're attacking something, say, I'm going to take D3 mortal wounds, and now I am +1 to wound you. Also very good, especially on things that have a feel no pain, like Chaos Spawns and Mutaliths. Even better on things like Chaos Spawns that get to heal their wounds at the top of each command phase, which is really good. So they just, Chaos Spawn, in my opinion, in this are really good, aside from the fact that you can no longer take Chaos Spawn in units of 4. We'll get to that. But overall, I mean, I don't want to play Zangors, but this looks really strong.
Yeah, I will say, as much as I joke, really just I hate how Thousand Sons have been saddled with this Zengor plague for the last three editions. I will admit the Warpmeld Pact does a good job of differentiating a Zengor list from a Thousand Sons list. The fact that Zengors aren't battle line anymore unless you take this detachment
Yep.
and gives them objective control too.
Yep.
I think that that's an excellent choice on the part of the rules writers. And they just everything sort of bleeds into this warp meld sacrifice rule by giving you ways to really take advantage of it in here. So that I think it's a
Yeah.
good change. Uh, I'm still never gonna let the goat herder
The
thing die though.
the eighth edition Goat Codex comes back to mind where it's like, oh God, here we go again.
Yep,
Um, I
but
will say the cool thing, the really cool thing that they've done with the enhancements is that if you look, we'll get to some of the data sheets again. They matter a lot for these detachments, but it's much easier to just kind of go through these things. Um, some of the sorcerers now have the ability to join things like Zangor Enlightened or Zangors. And in
yeah,
those cases, you now have an enhancement specifically for stuff like your Infernal Master and Sorcerer, where they can join it as well. So now you're talking, okay, I have my Infernal Master who has sustained hits. So now my Zangors get sustained hits. And on top of that, they get to scout. So that might be kind of fun. Uh, I'm not saying it's really good, but it might be kind of fun. And then, stuff where like, oh, okay, you can give a Zangor Shaman for Feel No Pain.
yeah.
I don't think that's all that great, to be honest, but eh, maybe an enhancement or two in here. The -1 to hit is really good. Um, Being able to add one to psychic tests is also pretty good on a Zangor
Well, it's
Shaman.
actually add one to psychic test for each mortal wound suffered as part of the D3 mortal wounds. It's so you could
They
get
don't have a
plus
feel no
three.
pain anymore, though. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
that's well. So if you look, there's a. I thought there was a thing for healing. Plus you get to
There's a
restore a D3
stratagem to
plus
do it.
once. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. So let's skip down to that then. So you do have there is a let's see here. So there's a stratagem for when a Thousand Sons character dies, you can just create a Chaos Spawn model. That's really cool. I also think it's really cool. I think it's only 1 CP, but I think it's really cool because you're basically getting free points through a stratagem. I think that's great. To anytime you can actually get free models on the table is pretty good. Same thing with the ability to pick a Zangor unit and return D3 +1 destroyed models. I think is also really good.
yeah,
I wish it was a little less random. I think it would be great if it was just like a flat amount that you got back, but I'm not gonna not the biggest thing. You can give a Zangor unit a 4-up invuln in your opponent's shooting phase or fight phase when they target it. So that's also pretty good. The timing on the triggering there is really good. Um, you can advance and shoot with
Advanced
mutants.
charge.
Advance and charge with
And
mutants. So your Mutolith can advance and charge across the board. That's really good. Your Chaos Mons also pretty good.
oh,
Zangors. I mean,
it
anything.
so turns out we're both right and wrong. It is shoot and charge with that touch by Zinch.
Fair enough. Even better.
Yeah,
But
it's a very
still,
solid strategy.
I mean, a Mutolith basically advancing across the table, shooting a railgun, and then deciding to charge something is just peak
Very, yeah,
Thousand
very
Suns. I
solid.
mean, that's great. Um, and then yeah, we've got an extra. We've got what, the 6-inch
Six
consolidate.
inch
Yeah,
pile in and consolidate.
yeah, that's what it looks like. And then we've got the a 3-inch deep strike.
Yeah, but you cannot charge if you use the 3 inch deep strike.
And I
But
will say, the fact that this says it's a 3-inch deep strike, I think this shows when this was written and that the codex or the stratagem was probably written before the errata, where everything now in the game is not 3 inches, it's 6 inches. So I think when this comes out, there's a day one FAQ to this or an errata to this that moves it to 6 inches from 3 inches, because nothing in the game anymore, as far as I know, has a 3-inch deep strike. It's all six
yeah,
now.
well, so think about the units you're going to use this on. Uh, so if it's a monster, it's 9 inches. So that means the only things you can use it on are Zengor units. And what's the worst gun that that unit's going to have? It's like auto pistols, change caster bows. But sneaky bit of play here. Let's say an enemy unit just has a on an objective. You can just dump a Zengor unit on that objective 3 inches away. They've got OC2, their objective secured, and so now that's your objective, and there's nothing they can do about it until their turn.
Yeah, I was looking at this and I was thinking, why would I want to use, if it's 9 inches for a monster, that's no different than the standard 9 inches you have to be from reserves. But what it does effectively is, for monsters, it gives them deep strike, but they can't
Yeah,
charge. And for everything else, it gives them probably a 6-inch deep strike, and they can't charge. And the six is, like you said, it's strong enough that you can go. They're going to be OC2 in this scenario, so you can put a ton of OC all of a sudden onto something. So when you get the secondary mission that says, "Hey, what is it? Overwhelming force," or the one that tells you to go take an objective that your opponent controls. Well, there you go. That's one CP and you've solved that problem. And the fact that Zangors can hop off the table now automatically at the end of your opponent's turn, really strong with this. A nice little combo.
yeah.
Mike, this is probably the Phalanx Detachment is probably the one that is, my guess is this is your like your
All
baby.
is dust. All is
Yep.
dust.
Yep.
Yes, this is my detachment. If
Yep.
I'm playing Thousand Suns, this is what I'm taking because this is just dusty boys in armor with their babysitter sorcerers marching across the battlefield. This is exactly what I want.
So you get -1 to damage, or -1 to or +1. Sorry, plus
Yeah,
one to your save for things that are 1 damage. So it's
yeah,
the same rule as we've had.
mhm.
A little bit of foreshadowing here. It is an unmodified damage characteristic of 1. Unmodified
Yes.
being the key word.
So against small arms, you're good to go versus big guns. I mean, it's still going to penetrate you anyways.
It's gonna suck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Detach or the enhancements, I think they might have some of the really good enhancements here. Obviously, Risen Rubrique, really, really good.
Yeah.
And
It's a classic.
the fact that you can infiltrate 20 Rubric Marines or 10 Terminators, and just, I mean, it is definitely a, if I go first, I win kind of play, where if it's just like, hey, I infiltrate 10 Terminators and I go first,
Yeah.
like, I've
Yeah.
won the game. That is a very possible thing there. Now, this is one of the other controversial things. technically, because of the sequencing of how enhancements work, when things gain abilities, and when you attach characters to units, if you put this on a Thousand Suns Terminator and you attach them to the Terminator unit, technically right now that unit cannot infiltrate because of the timing on that. So the unit would not, or the character would not gain infiltrators because he is not part of the unit when those abilities fire off, and you essentially say, okay, they have that ability and they can infiltrate. um I think this gets FAQ'd. Either they say, yeah, that's how it works, or no, you can actually, we'll reword this and say, while leading a unit, the unit has infiltrate. If they reword that, they're good to go. But as it's written right now, if you want to infiltrate your unit of Scarab Occult Terminators, you can put this on a Terminator Sorcerer. And in some games, maybe you don't want to infiltrate them. And in those, you attach it to the unit, but you keep your Scarab Occult Terminator not attached to the Rubric unit, and then you can actually choose the Terminator unit and go infiltrate them. The reason it doesn't work, rules as written right now, is because every model in the unit has to have infiltrate in order to be able to go do that. And the
Right.
fact that the timing and the sequence of when those things happen, we're getting way into the nuances of the deployment sequences. Competitively, that matters. Casual games, it probably doesn't. You can probably talk with your friend, opponent, whoever you're playing with, and probably just say, yeah, this works. And no one's gonna have any problem with that. But the right now it's kind of a kind of one of those like gotcha kind of situations where you if you're going to infiltrate the unit of Terminators, you have to make sure that the Terminator Sorcerer is not associated with them, if that's the unit you're putting the enhancement on.
Yeah.
Other than that, though,
Arcane Thralls, kind of eh.
you say that, but I'll tell you what. It's an aura, and it's a 9-inch aura, and you know how much this thing costs? It's 5 points.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say that is value. How
Sure,
many
sure.
things let you just re-roll battle shock tests? And the fact that, okay, I'm probably going to fail it in an army that, like we've been
So,
saying, doesn't have cabal or command point generation. So
yeah.
I
So,
really like this. I really like it.
yeah. So, remind me, you can only take one enhancement per character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, you want to use Risen Rubrique. So that's one character. You want to use Lord of Rubrique on a unit of Terminators is just amazing. So, you want to have that one.
Yep.
The Stay of Abominus is amazing because it affects all melee weapons. So, it affects your staff plus your Kopesh. If or so you that's really good. That means you're gonna have to take a
But
fourth character to take your Arcane Thralls if you
but I'll
wanted to
tell
use
you
the other three really good ones.
I'll tell you why I'm not taking the Staff Abominus. While it does affect both weapons, you don't get to use both weapons in close combat. You only get
True.
to use one or the other because it is not extra attacks.
Mm,
And while I do think sustained D3 and devastating wounds are fantastic to put onto one model, most of the stuff you're going to put it on, I don't want to be charging into combat.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably much more useful to take the 5 points and just say, hey, I get to reroll battle shocks with everything, with every unit within 9 inches. Like, I'm much more excited about that one. But
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt, the other two, Lord of the Rubrique, I mean, you put that on a Thousand Suns Sorcerer and put that with the Terminators, and now you're hitting on twos.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
outstanding. And then Risen Rubrique again, I think it's a potential go first, win first kind
Yeah,
of thing.
it's very much an auto take with this
Yep.
detachment. If you're not
And
taking it, you're
and I think if you're planning on doing that, redeployment isn't going to bail you out of it. That's the one downside, because
yeah,
redeployments now are sequenced so that you don't know who's going first when you redeploy. That's the unfortunate thing. So taking an Aramon who has a redeployment built into him, it's good if you want to use the robots, and I think we'll get to that. But in this case, it's not going to give you the situation to say, look, if you infiltrate them, you're committing to it. Redeploying is kind of, you know,
Yeah.
not really doing very much for you. Like, what was the
You,
point of infiltrating to begin with 10 Terminators? Like, if your goal is to block out zoning, take the robots and use them to do that, and then redeploy them.
yeah. I mean, very
So,
much. If you're using this, you have to commit to the bit and just the consequences.
um,
But let's see.
I mean, right off the bat, fallback, shoot and charge, for one CP, phenomenal.
Yeah,
I mean, just absolutely phenomenal to have that on your units. Means you don't have to like shoot yourself out of combat with stuff like
yeah.
Cabal powers.
Revenge of the River K is actually also pretty good.
Yeah.
If you can, set up the circumstances. Free shooting is always appreciated.
You do get assault, which is kind of like we're kind of slow.
Yeah, I mean,
Terminators advancing and shooting is, I guess, kind of cool, but
I
you're
mean,
not
if
charging.
yeah, I mean, the big thing is if it's a difference between getting on an objective and not. Um,
Yeah,
I see a use for that
I can
with
see that.
a rubric army.
I can see that. And I like in this edition that it's not a -1 to hit on top of that. So you're not paying a penalty. It's just basically you either get to advance and shoot or you don't.
Yeah, Implacable Guardians is solid. I do wish it worked with the all is dust rule, but I understand why they
Rules is
didn't do
written
that.
right now. It doesn't. Yeah,
Oh
because
no, it's
it's
yeah,
modifying the damage. And unfortunately, unless
yeah,
they reword some things here or errata some things, this is, in my opinion, 2 CP for this. You're not going to use it. I mean,
yeah. Well,
the reality is if where's it going to make a difference? It's going to make the difference on the breakpoints of 2 damage and 3 damage.
yeah,
Because
no,
2 damage,
100%.
you're going to 1 damage on a Terminator unit or even a Rubric Marine unit. That makes sense. 3 damage to 2 damage on your Rubric Marines, you're not going to bother. On your Terminators, you might because now it takes 2 wounds to kill a Terminator versus 3 wounds
Right.
or
I
one
mean,
wound,
and
right?
that's really when you want to use this is whenever you're about like that break point,
Yep.
and that's still common enough that there's definitely some a use case for this thing. Again, 2 CP,
Too
a
much.
little
Too much.
excessive, but
Yeah. And
oh,
here's the
here it
stratagem I
is.
was looking for. Yeah, this is the one I was looking for in Grand Coven. So they've moved it here. Your bolters become psychic, they become strength 5. Um, great. Okay. You don't have the reroll wound mechanic that you really need to really make that work great, and you don't have the devastating wounds with it as well. But okay, it's here. Eh.
Yeah, and
Uh,
unwavering phalanx, actually pretty good.
Yeah, -1 to wound is just great. And the fact that it's in the
It's in the chart. It's just kind of not as great.
yeah,
I'd prefer it to be
it's
in the
only in the
fight
fight
phase,
phase. Yeah, it's only in the
but
fight phase.
it's still a pretty solid power for especially because you're going to have the 2 units up right up front early on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird that they made this only in the fight phase. That's kind of unfortunate. Now, we'll get to the data sheets here in a minute. We've got one more detachment to get through and probably the derpiest of them all, but yeah, I think the -1 rune strat there is probably not going to see very much use.
And now
The
for
vehicles.
the one people who like vehicles. Uh,
I'm Okay, so it's pretty simple. If you're within range of a psyker model, you get to re-roll a hit, wound, and damage roll, a single one of each.
yep,
Otherwise, you get to re-roll one hit, wound, or damage roll, just one of the three.
yeah. And your metal boxes blow up on a 5+ instead of a 6.
That part is just stupid.
It is pretty bad.
Do you remember our game we played where I was bringing the Soulforge stuff ages ago and you were blowing stuff up and it was like, oh, look, the Soulforge stuff blew up on like a 4 up. It was like the Dreadnoughts or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Hellforged is what it was. Not Soulforge. The Hellforged
That
stuff
was
always
bad.
blew up on
I,
like
I
fours or
do
fives
I
next to
do
Psychers.
recall you dealt more damage to yourself than I did, just
That's what
because
I'm
of the chain
saying.
reactions. Yeah,
Yeah, that's just dumb.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's like
honestly,
very little upside for a worse downside.
yeah, I mean, the only thing I could think of is like you run a Mauler Fiend up, and then you just keep somebody close by on the off chance that that 5-up
It
explosion
blows up.
gets you something. But then why don't they just kill your Psyker who's hovering around the close combat? It's kind of strange. So actually, I think
Yeah,
there is a thing for that. They can like, if you have perplexing coat, if you're within 3 inches of a Thousand Suns vehicle, you have lone operative, thus
right.
ensuring when it blows up, you're in range.
Just to make sure. Just to make
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Warp siphon's kind of neat. It lets you pass on your perils of the warp onto the vehicle. If I
Right.
remember.
That is a good strat. I can't deny that's a good strat. I really like being able to just shed them over to the vehicles. And maybe you bring like a defiler, and
Yeah,
the defiler has a 6-up field of pain, and you just use your defilers to just shed your mortals there, and maybe 16% of them are not taken.
yeah, and then you have biomechanical mutations, so you can
Yep.
heal your vehicles. That's solid. Um, and then another bonus to your ritual ranges.
You know, I'm
Uh,
really disappointed here in Mike. I think the biochemical mutation and the perplexing cloak really should be one enhancement. And that essentially what it would do is turn a psyker into a warpsmith, if you think
yes,
about it. They get the loan up for being within 3, and then they also get to heal the vehicles. And the other option should be on there on top of it is the fact that it either lets them heal it or give them +1 to hit or something like that, or both, in theory, where they're a psyker and they do that. But I guess we have to wait for another edition at least until we get our warpsmith psyker.
yeah, but
Okay. I mean, look, Thousand Suns don't have the greatest vehicles. That is the reality of things. We are a psychic army. Our strength relies on our psychers, rubric marines, terminators, magnus, that kind of stuff. We just are not a vehicle army. Only in the fact that it's kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, we used to be marines, or we used to be part of the imperium, and so we still have stuff like rhinos, which got really good, but predators and defilers and stuff like that, they're there, but they're not we're not an army that you just go, hey, I'm going to run a whole bunch of demon engines, and it's someone's going to look at it and go, oh god, it's a bunch of Thousand Suns demon engines, I'm scared. It's just not happening.
yeah. Well, we do have our new Robo friends who are technically vehicles. Turns
All
out.
right. All right, technically vehicles, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's some solid stratagems here. I mean, -1 to armor penetration.
I'll say
You
this,
ignore modifiers to a weapon skill, ballistic skill. You have mutate landscape is nice.
it's back.
It is. Ensorcelled infusion is pretty solid on like
Yep.
predator or
Warp Flame
again
Gargoyles is
warp
back.
flame. Yeah, but they nerfed it.
Yeah. Well, they nerfed it from not existing to this. I mean, you're right.
Yeah, I
You're
just
right.
I
It's
feel
horrible.
like
It's
if
always horrible.
yeah, and then cyber spirit machinations is actually really good. If you're running the vehicle list, there's nothing worse than a Gretchen tagging your predator. And, well, now I have to spend an entire turn backing up so I can get tagged by the Gretchen again.
Yep. Or you're
So,
or you're shooting at -1 to hit when you're in combat with the
yeah,
Gretchen, right? So now you get to move out of combat and now have to not
right,
worry about that, right?
exactly.
So that makes sense. It's a nice strat. I mean, honestly, the strats that they put in here make sense. They're the ones that,
Yeah,
like, Warp Flame Gargoyles. When I heard there was going to be a vehicle detachment, I'm like, yeah, Warp Flame Gargoyles will be in there, and it is, and it's terrible, and it's always been terrible. So I mean, what? Look, if you want to run a bunch of Thousand Suns vehicles and you want to have fun, this detachment looks fun. It looks like you can have a good time. Take like 3 Vindicators and just shove them up the field and just go, wee, this is fun.
yeah.
Sure. I just don't think it's good. Right. I
I,
just don't. I don't see a list that sticks out to me in this where it's like I can take advantage of this and really have a strong list. I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is the list that to me, if you have have a collection of models that includes a lot of vehicles, and none of the other ones really like stand out to you as like, I want these, and you know what, those new Robo friends, they're nice. I want a unit of those. This is the detachment I would take. But if I'm like building a Thousand Suns list, I would not build towards this detachment. This is
Yeah.
a well, I've got some friends coming over. It's Saturday. Let's drink some beers and just blow some stuff up. That's this detachment in a
Yep.
nutshell, and I love it for it. It's just it's kind of the an odd man out. It doesn't really mesh very strongly with the identity of like the classic Thousand Suns list.
Yeah. They could have done better. You know,
Yeah,
that that's
I think so.
that's what this feels like. And honestly, we're at the end of the detachments at this point. That's my take on the detachments so far. The detachments and the army rule, everything feels like they could have done better. I don't know how else to sum it up. I,
Yeah,
it looks fun. I think folks who are really big on the army, they don't care about playing competitively. They just want to have fun on Saturdays. This codex is great for them because there is a lot of stuff to play with. But the reality is, I don't feel like a lot of it is strong enough for the things they took away. It's not good enough. Like it's not strong enough for you to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to a tournament this weekend. It's a big event. It's a big GT. I want Thousand Suns are my army. I know how to play them. I want a strong solution to being able to go in and handle any all comers and hopefully play my way to as best a result as I can. This codex in its current state, I don't think gives anybody a very good chance in that kind of scenario. And that's just my take. I could be wrong, and that in 3 weeks here, everybody gets it, and we start seeing folks that are running things and they're dominating with it. But I don't feel like that's what's going to happen. I just kind of feel like it's scaling the army back, adding some of the flavor in there that people have wanted in the army, and it is what it is at this point. I think the reality is we are looking at having to wait until the fall for GW to rewrite a lot of these detachments and like they did with AdMech and buff them. But
yeah. I think that of the detachments we have here, the probably the most applicable for a competitive tournament, I think you are right, is the Warpmeld pact. My only concern there is I don't think it has the staying power to
yeah,
reach late game because you're
yeah,
relying on Zengor as your battle line. The other one you'll probably see is going to be the Grand Coven because it builds around a strong centerpiece.
yep,
Magnus can very much carry a game
yep.
as long as you're not playing versus an army that has enough Alpha Strike to just melt them off the table.
And
Which
even then,
the,
now
the
he still has the damage blanking ability in there. So even stuff like
yeah,
the strongest guns in the game, unless they hit dev wounds on it, you still have a very very solid chance of surviving
right.
with Magnus. Yeah,
It does have the tools to help him survive.
yeah,
Um, but I do think the other detachments just kind of they're fluffy. I like them. They're the type of thing that I like, but going into a competitive environment, I
yeah,
don't think that they have the tools necessary to really face all comers, and
yeah.
that's gonna limit what they can do.
Yep. Well, the good thing is Magnus hasn't changed all that much. They took away his
Yeah,
+1 to hit and wound. They kept his three auras, which are good, or his three Crimson King abilities. All three were great. I used all three at some point. Although the one where something shooting him as hazardous, I think I used once in 2 years. So it's usually either -1 damage or +2 to movement. You usually toggle both of those. Early game, you're usually doing +2 to movement. So you just let everything just zoom across the table. And then once you're ready to expose Magnus, then you're switching over to -1 damage. And by then, everything should be in position. Um, the fact that he can attempt two rituals and he gets +2 to the test. Look, I think in Grand Coven, there's a very good chance that what you're doing is you're casting most of your really important stuff with Magnus.
Yeah,
You're just using those buffs, you center it around it, and I mean that from my opinion, I think that's kind of what you're doing. And that's 50% of your cabal powers are getting casted with Magnus. You only have four now. So um other than that, I think the one change they did make is they now let the Zinch's Firestorm ignore cover. I think that's good. His everything else just pretty much remains. Although Gaze of Magnus goes from strength 9 to strength 11, which is good because now you're
that's
on.
a necessary touch.
That makes sense with the loss of the +1 to wound because basically you are now going from wounding most vehicles. I think the only other things you don't wound are knights. You wound knights on fives when before it was on fours, but I believe you can use the detachment to do to or the I believe there was a way to get around that so that you could reroll
Uh,
wounds in that detachment. So that gives you a little bit of a
refresh myself.
yeah. But I mean, honestly, he hasn't changed all that much. I think he's still great. The field manual puts him at 420. That feels right. I don't know about you. That feels right to me.
Yeah, given what he does, 420 is feels right.
It's a good number for him too.
Yeah. So the devastating sorcery is the thing you're thinking of. It would let
Yeah.
him re-roll hits and wound rolls for the phase.
Yeah. And like I was saying when we were looking at the detachment, I think that's what you're dumping into him anyways.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you're just loading up on Magnus and just saying, look, he's the centerpiece of the army. He's where you dump a lot of your resources. You ride that until as far into the game as you can, and then you let the rest of your army kind of pick up the pieces and finish up scoring.
Yeah.
Well, Aramon has lost his disc. He has gotten old enough that he now has been relegated to permanent mobility scooter mode. So his
Yeah.
Zinch mobility scooter is what he is stuck on now for the rest of his life. He no longer can run around on feet, but with that, uh, he can be attached to Zangor Enlightened. He can fly around with his Zangor bows and Zangor spears and go hunting for whatever he wants to go hunt for.
Yeah.
He he does give you a redeployment ability. I think what that is really going to be coupled with or handcuffed with are the robots who have infiltrate. Because I think what you'll be able to do is use the robots to infiltrate, block things out, and then use Aramon to redeploy things. He does give you +1 to cast when you do a ritual on him. Also pretty good because you could do a really important one on him. But again, the downside is going to be you're taking 3d6 in those cases most likely, and what you're really doing is using that +1 to keep it in the bag.
Yeah. One thing I will say about Aramon is I do kind of feel kind of hampers his usefulness. In my opinion, is he doesn't really do anything for the group he's leading. He helps your army as a whole, and obviously he
Yeah,
casts powers better. But I mean, there's no reason why he has to necessarily always use his powers on himself.
yeah,
Uh, but his transmogrifying blast still pretty good,
yeah.
and there's no
Although it's
slouch who
not the
can
same
stop
as it
that.
used to be. It's D6 +1 blast at 6 - 1 and D3 damage. I think that's probably pretty good as it's not a precision ability anymore. So he's no
Right,
longer a character hunter. So it doesn't
right.
have the damage output, I think. But I think blast D6 +1 blast is damn good at strength 1 -1 D3. I think that's damn good.
Yeah,
Um, and like I
especially
was
in
saying,
the Grand Coven where
yeah,
it gets
and like I was saying, he retains infantry, even
yeah,
if you put him
that's
on disc, which is great because now he can go through walls, even though he's mounted.
yeah, that's a good change.
Infernal Master remains pretty much the same as he was before. He gets sustained hits, he gets to flip a dice like he used to. He still has his force staff, still has his same shooting ability, which basically is the ability to Overwatch like crazy with Arcane Vortex. So I think you probably load up on this guy, or you at least take this guy in the Grand Coven with Magnus, because you want to put the Arcane Vortex on him, or the Eldritch Vortex now. But otherwise, he's unchanged, and that's fine. He's
Yeah,
good. He was
he's
good. He was fine the way he was.
very solid
Yep.
leader.
Sorcerer has done some change. So now the Sorcerer gives you lethal hits. Before, I think that was the Exalted Sorcerer that was giving lethal hits. And this guy used to give you an 18-inch range non-targetable ability. I think that's been moved to a different Sorcerer. But now you get lethal hits, and basically once per battle, you get to basically make this guy go Super Saiyan, where he gets um, +3 to strength attacks and +3 to the strength and the number of attacks to his psychic weapons, which is actually hilarious because it's already 6 attacks. So it goes to
With
9 attacks,
sustained hits 3.
and it has sustained hits 3. Yeah, exactly. Now it's only damage 1. It is strength 5, but in theory, Mike, I could see this being something where you potentially do consider well, no, I don't think I would ever consider taking the Arcane Vortex off the Infernal Master to put it over onto this guy, because
No.
then you'd be up to let's see, strength 8 and strength. Actually, it would go to strength 9 and damage 2. But you still have to hit. I don't know. I'd have to run some math on that and whether that's actually even worth it or not. You still would have the ability to reroll wounds with the Rubric Marines. But
Yeah,
I don't know. It kind of seems like I need a little extra power. I'm gonna go. I get to do it once per battle.
I would
When they
agree.
go to shoot.
The turn that you get the either devastating wounds or +1 to wound, um, that's the
Yeah.
turn I would pop the Twisted Sorceries ability.
Yep. Completely agree. All right. So then we had the looks like we had a couple pages of the sorcerer. So now we
Exalted
got the
Sorcerer.
exalted sorcerer. So his ability is the same. He still gives you the 4-up invuln for the unit, as well as the ability to revive. I don't remember whether the revive before was D3 bodyguards or whether it's just 2 bodyguards on a 6. Very unlikely. I mean, you're as likely to revive 2 units as you are to take mortals.
Yeah,
He's
but even
okay.
one bodyguard per turn plus the 4-up invuln save, it's a solid like support leader.
I
He's
just
going to
don't
be
think
your
revive.
go-to for the
Yeah,
rubric detachment, in my
I
opinion.
I think I agree with that. Aside from the Infernal Master that has the Arcane Vortex, you'll definitely do that. And then I think what you do is before what you would do is you would take 10 Rubric Marines with Flamers with Aramon. I think because of the glow up in the AP on the bolters, I think you can consider doing a bolter unit with the Infernal Master, and that's your because they would then get sustained. They benefit from that, and it would
Yeah,
synergize a little bit more. I think that's kind of what you would do, as long as you're taking other stuff with it. But I think you still probably focus on flamers here with the Exalted Sorcerer, and your goal is really just you have a 4-up invuln all the time, which means in combat as well, which was always pretty good, but. I think most people just favored the Infernal Master because of the points and the cabals that you would get, because this guy was always more expensive. So,
yeah,
um, yeah. The Exalted Sorcerer on disc here, kind of interesting. So he still gives you um, he actually gains the 18-inch bubble where if you're outside of 18, you can't shoot these guys, his unit. But he keeps the -2 to charge ability that he had where he has to shoot you and then you get to subtract from 2 from their movement, I think, and charge rolls. Good ability, really, really good ability. Unfortunately, it's only an 18-inch range on this guy. So I feel like this is kind of the thing that you would probably target for extending the range for psychic weapons. So then you get 24 for it. Because 18 inches, even if you have the movement, or sorry, even if you -2 the movement and -2 the charge, you're not essentially out of danger. I think there are enough armies that just kind of go, well, we move fast, like Eldar or Harlequins or Howling Banshees or things like that, which you do not want to get into combat with. Uh, those things are just going to kind of go, whatever. We counter it, and then they'll
Yeah.
just go right straight at you.
So the
So
big thing about this guy is I think he's going to be sort of your go-to unit leader for, oh sorry, warlord for the Warpmeld uh, detachment.
yeah,
Because you put him with Zangors and 18 inches of you can't be selected as a target outside of that. That's really just
pretty good.
it isolates this unit as okay, only the things directly around me are a threat to me. I don't have to worry about that basilisk on the other side of the table. I'm
Yep,
just so it's a solid uh leader ability
yep,
and
yep,
definitely
absolutely.
pretty decent.
And hilariously, I wonder if you could, because this guy's an infantry, I wonder if you could give him um, you could put this guy with the enhancement that lets him go with Zangors. So even though it might be a little bit counterintuitive to put him with Zangor, you'd want to put him with Zangor Lighten. But if you put him with Zangors, then in those lists, like if indirect fire is a big problem in your meta, or it's something that you're going to face, there you go. I mean,
Yeah.
the example you gave just kind of set that off with me. It was like, yeah, you can put this guy with Zangors with the enhancement in that detachment, and
Hmm.
the indirect stuff you don't even have to worry about.
Right.
All right, so the Demon Princes, they got quite an improvement here. They both have gained a psychic attack in addition to their infernal cannon that they've had. The Demon Prince on foot gives the stealth aura like he used to. And in addition to that, what he essentially does is when another psyker, a Thousand Sun psyker, dies within um, 9 inches of him, he basically like eats their soul and then gets +1 to his psychic tests for the rest of the game, which is kind of cool. He basically just absorbs their soul and gets stronger. And then on top of that, he gets the ability to get lone up as long as he stays within 3 inches of infantry units. So even though the stealth aura has now been nerfed to only target infantry units, he's going to want to be around infantry units anyways. So honestly, not bad. I honestly really like this. And he gains devastating wounds on his swords. I
Yeah.
literally have nothing to complain about with the Demon Prince. He is great.
Yeah. He's a very solid unit for what you get now.
Yep.
And the Dark Blessing is just excellent
Yeah.
for
Yes.
letting them
It's
just reach
anything
out and
with
touch
sustained
somebody.
is fantastic.
Mhm.
And the great thing is, with that being a psychic attack, it works in almost every detachment. So you could take this guy in Grand
Yeah.
Coven in theory. You could take him in the Rubric detachment in theory, and he's going to work in both of them, which is really, really good. The winged variant of it becomes a little bit different. So he's a little bit more of like a character hunter, the way they've written the rules. So he gets to come down within, like, he can, first of all, deep strike. If I come down to his actual profile, there we go. He deep strikes, which means he now can be put in reserves and come in anywhere on the table, which is great. On top of that, he can come down, and he has a built-in ability to come down within 6 inches of, or at 6 inches away from enemy models. And if he does, then you get to use the Dark Blessing ability, which would basically, or the buff to it, which takes it from sustained 1 to sustained D3. So even though you give up your charge, it basically would give him a lot more sustained hits. And on top of that, the fact that he is built to target psychic units and psychic characters, he is that dark blessing is basically there for him to go around, hunt characters, and try to snipe them out essentially of other units. So he gets reroll hits of 1 in against units of sorry,
Character
reroll hits
units.
and wounds of 1 against character units. But if he's targeting a specific character, I
Uh,
believe he rerolls hits and wounds, right?
Psyker character. He
Psyker
rolls
character.
all hits and wounds. And then if he kills that character, he
He regains
restores a
wounds.
D3 lost wounds.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. Which is really good. Really, really good.
yeah, and if the character was a psyker, it's just flat 3 lost wounds.
Yep.
So he's very solid. He's very much an assassin style character. He wants to sort of hop around and sort of take out support characters. I don't think you want to throw him into a fight versus like a combat monster character. I don't think he has quite the chops for that. But if he hops around and like takes out lieutenants and
Yeah,
uh,
five
things
man
that,
five man marine units with characters. Is I think
yeah,
what this guy is really designed to go do. Now he's not going to snipe them out like I was saying. He's what
no,
he's going to do is he's basically going to shoot them, damage a lot of them, and hopefully get it down to a point where now he can go into the unit that is still, at one or two Marines left, and his sword is going to be enough that he just absolutely obliterates them because he still would get, like, if it's a psychic unit, he just absolutely would tear them apart with reroll hits and wounds with a sword that has dev wounds and damage 3. I mean, even just 6 attacks is enough.
yeah,
But I think that's kind of what he's geared to do, is be like a solo hop around the board assassin and go after units like that and take them out.
yeah,
And it's
I
good
agree.
because having units like that are self-sufficient are very, very valuable.
Yeah,
Terminator Sorcerer still gives lethal wounds. He also now has the same ability where if he shoots a unit, or his units shoot something, and they hit that unit, everything else in your army gets +1 to hit against it. Very good. Um, Other than
yeah,
that, he retains pretty much the same stuff he had before. I think Gaze of Hate got a little bit of a buff because it's damage
yeah.
2 now,
It's
but
yeah, anti-vehicle, anti-monster, devastating wounds, damage too.
yeah,
Pretty,
it's
pretty
it's pretty
solid.
good. Yeah, 3 attacks, but still very solid.
Yeah,
Honestly, he's I think Terminator sorcerers will be seen more, just because of scarab occults when we get to them. And then we are on to the robots. So the robots. Yeah. First of all, before we even get to the profile, Mike, the paint scheme on them. Do you like it? Do you not like it?
I hate this weird Ossiarch Bone Reaper paint trim that they did on them.
It
If
looks
they're
bad.
Thousand Suns robots, that should have been gold
Yeah.
or blue and gold, or because they like it's obvious that they like did a lot of hard work getting the traditional alternating blue and yellow like stripes inside the armor section. But there's nothing else in our army's like color palette that uses this weird bone color,
Yeah.
and it's an odd choice. I think based off of the rumors I've heard is that they were working on them, and then the like marketing team was like, "Hey, we need to have these ready like tomorrow," and they're like, "Well, okay," and so they just did the bare minimum they had to do on the rest of the model to make it look right,
Yeah. That's
and it.
that's the same thing I heard. Yeah.
Um, I do so. Putting that aside, I've actually loaded pictures of these things into a paint.net and put made them black and white and just started like glazing in the lines to see like what else you could do with them. The models themselves, I actually like the choices they made because they like once you put the color scheme aside, there's actually a lot of neat details here. There's going to be a lot
Mhm.
of fun to paint these. I think that they could have taken
Done
an
better.
extra day to do a
Yeah.
little better. Um,
Yeah.
but otherwise, I like them. I think that they offer a nice sort of middle ground between a Terminator and like a Hilbert
Yeah.
in terms of like design philosophy. Obviously, they are Martian robots still. Um,
And it's funny because what was it, like a year or 2 years ago, we were just like pounding the table on, let's get the psychic robots into the army. Like, we need more
yeah,
stuff. And here it is, 2025, and we're getting our robots. I don't
yeah,
think this is what I expected. Uh when you say, hey, we're going to get robots, I think most folks would say, hey, we'll get like a chaos looking variant of the 30K robots that they have.
Yeah,
But you know what? At the end of the day, they're kind of growing on me. I'm not super upset about how they look. I can live with it. They're a little bit the legs being a little lanky and the model looks a little bit lanky in general. I think
sure.
I'd rather see something that was a little bit more bulky and you know built looking like it was built for war rather than something that just kind of derps around the table.
Yeah,
But in general, I'll live with it. I ordered 2 boxes of Hex Flame. We'll see if we get them, and we'll see if we put them on the table. So,
yeah. I mean,
the
the rules they're actually very solid, though, I will say. We've got two pretty potent loadouts. Um, One I would call your hunter loadout, where you
yep,
replace your warp flame projector. So you replace so you have a melta gun on these things, and they move
yep,
pretty quick, and so you just have them running around the battlefield with their melta gun just popping vehicles. Uh, it's solid.
yep,
But I think the variant we're going to actually see though is going to be replacing the melta gun with the warp flame projector and the power claw, because
yeah,
that gives them two flamers, and then they can overwatch for free once per battle round.
yep,
It's just, and obviously they've got infiltrate, they've got stealth. There's
yep.
just a really good like area denial.
Yeah, I think I'm expecting like I said before, the fact that we were seeing stuff that has a 3-inch deep strike rule on it tells me that this was written before some of the erratas. And at the same time that they did the errata for that, I believe they did the errata for the stratagems, where
Hmm.
now they've changed a little bit. I think we could potentially see a little bit of a reworking to the wording for that, where you can use it at -1 CP, even if it's already been used. I think that
Yeah.
opens up the door so that you can overwatch with multiple units of it once per battle round,
Hmm.
which I think is probably more up the alley of what you expect from a value for these guys.
Yeah.
Uh, infiltrating stealth, both very good. I don't know how much the stealth is really going to come in, to be honest, because you are putting them in really close. So the bigger danger is not necessarily shooting attacks on these guys, it's probably combat. They're close to a Terminator profile, maybe a little bit tankier with the wounds, but it's a 3-up, 5-up, not a 3-up, 2-up, 4-up. So they're not going to save as much when they do get attacked. So, you know, I I honestly think the unit is not bad, and I think it'll be in a bunch of lists. I just don't think they're amazing. I don't think you just load up on these things and go, "Hey, I'm going to win a bunch of games because I got these
Oh,
guys
no,
on my list."
these very much to me are a support unit for the rest of the codex,
Yeah.
and their speed and the fact that they're like one dot lighter on armor than the Terminator unit. Like I said, they're supposed to be area denial at least for a while. They're not supposed to
Hmm.
stick around
Hmm.
though.
Yeah, they're your early game. And like I was saying before, I also think in a lot of ways, these guys, if you take them in your list, you almost have to have a redeployment ability or Aramon, one of those two. Like your detachment, if you're in that detachment and you have that ability to redeploy, great. Otherwise, you need Aramon. And there are going to be scenarios where you want to use their infiltrate ability, but not keep them there at the start of the game. Like, hey, I'm playing against
Yeah,
world eaters or something, or uh, Nurgle. Nurgle sticks out to me with the Nurglings. Like they're a counter Nurgling play where you take a couple units of these and you use that to screen out the table so that they can't forward deploy on you. So therefore, once you're done with that use is done. You don't want to keep them forward deployed potentially. So then you want to
right.
redeploy them back to your deployment zone and go from there. So I could
Hmm.
I could see that being something where you want to keep that open, or that strategy open for you to be able to do that. And the only way you do that is if you have Aramon in your list, I think. So I
Yeah,
think those two kind of hilariously they kind of get handy or handcuffed together. But again, I think they're going to do just fine. I think you're right in that the flamer loadout is probably what people take because they're going to want to do the Overwatch stuff with it. putting a bunch of Melta forward is not bad either. And again, depends on what you're typically playing against. If you're playing against a bunch of vehicles on the norm, then Melta is probably the way to go because you put a bunch of Melta up front, you go first. There
Yeah.
you go. You have a way to go put some Melta into things before your back lines have had a chance to move up the field. All right. We're on to the Scarab Terminators. Mike, I think these are the most improved units in the entire codex. They are the strongest unit in the entire codex right now. That's including Magnus and everything else. I say that because real clearly they are -1 to wound all the time. And these guys for a unit of 10, 375 points. I don't think you beat that, honestly. I think that is just really, really, really good value. I think they show up in every list just because of how good that is. They look cool. They've always looked cool. So it's kind of like, why would you not take these guys?
Yeah, I think having a big like 10-man unit of Scarabocult is going to be a very solid foundation for almost any Thousand Suns list.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're tough as nails. They still have just deal a lot of damage at range, and they're not slouches in close combat, especially with the additional tools that we have in some of the other detachments to just give them a leg up.
Yep.
Um, so I'm completely in agreement. I mean, the only thing that they quote unquote lack on is objective control, but they're
Yeah.
not supposed to really camp an objective, so that's not a huge problem.
Nothing's supposed to be alive contesting the objective with them, too. I mean, that's the other
Yeah,
thing. So
100%.
yeah, I don't know what else to say about them. I mean, I think they are just super, super good. They improved, by the way, we haven't mentioned this, but they improved the range of the Hellfire missiles. So they are now
They
36
did.
inches. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
The psychic ability on the Scarab Occult Sorcerer is also improved slightly, I believe, because it is 3 shots now at anti-infantry forward with dead wounds, which is
Mhm.
I have nothing to complain about that. You're putting potentially two and a half, two dead wounds into something. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah,
I
it's very solid.
honestly think I honestly think also so you can take a bunch of 5-man units as well, and I think that actually opens the door for these guys because of the changes to the army rule and the fact that you're casting more frequently. I think it opens up the door now for you to take more smaller units than it does bigger units. And 5-man units of Scarab Occults, I think then opens up the door for Warp Flamers, heavy Warp Flamers to be part of the unit a little bit more because you now actually have an Overwatch threat with the unit on top of just, okay, a 10-man unit with bolters. Yeah, you could Overwatch with them. That's just so many shots. But even just a single heavy flamer in the unit getting Overwatch, I don't have a problem with that. I think you could potentially sell me on running a heavy warp flamer with the missile rack on it as part of that unit. So maybe not the most optimal, but I think you could sell me on it.
Huh, that's interesting. So I was double checking their wording with the so it's as long as it's a psyker model. So obviously the
Yes,
Scarab Sorcerer is a psyker, so that they don't
correct.
even need a leader. So they're very self-sufficient.
Yep.
But the only
Yeah, I
leader
I
they
don't
have,
think you need to have the Terminator Sorcerer with them
yeah,
babysitting
uh,
them all the time.
yeah. I mean, having lethal hits is nice, but it plays counter to their devastating wounds weapons. So
But think about this. You're not really getting devastating wounds with the bolters anymore. And
right, it's
that's the
just
main
the
thing, right?
right,
So
yeah.
I think you're right. I think you just don't need
Actually,
they're self-sufficient.
oh
You just
wow,
run a 10-man by themselves.
yeah. But lethal hits on that many combi bolter shots is also pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, Rubric Marines. Only change here really is the Icon of Flame. They still retain their reroll wound ability. I think that is key to the army's success going forward. This is the
Yeah.
core unit that everybody takes in their army. Uh, the fact that you retain the reroll wounds on stuff that's on objective markers that you don't control is extremely good. Uh, it's basically if you're used to playing Thousand Suns today, Rubric Marines are going to behave exactly as they have. I think the only thing they've done is just now open up the ability to take bolters in some situations because now those bolters are AP2 and the Soul Reaper cannon is also AP2. So when you pair them with a unit of um, or you pair them with an Infernal Master, now you've got sustained one with that unit. It can add up with the number of shots that you get with these guys.
Yeah.
I
That's
still think the Flamers are probably king in most situations. I think the only scenario you take some bolters is with an Infernal Master, but you're taking Flamers all the other times just because of the Overwatch threat there, especially stuff that's on objectives. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, you're ignoring cover with bolters. So you go from AP1 not ignoring cover to AP2 ignoring cover. That's the essential. That's effectively a 3 AP or a 2 AP bump in the bolter
huh.
efficiency.
So I just noticed something. The Inferno bolters aren't rapid fire.
They are not.
They're just attacks too, all the time. Which
Were they
means
rep?
at
Huh.
range, they're dealing as much damage as Scarab Occults, model for model.
Yes, at range they are. And then the Scarab Occults get rapid fire, right?
Yeah, so Scarab Occults are rapid fire too. So at 12 inches, they're dealing 4 shots. Uh, Let me pull up like Codex.
Yeah, well, actually, Mike, that's how they've always been.
Is it?
Yeah. No
Hmm.
one's been taking bolt guns. So the fact that we're surprised by this should be no shock to anybody. But yeah, revisiting Infernal bolt guns on Marines, they've been non-rapid fires forever now in the current codex, and I think
Oh yeah, you're
the
right.
the Scarab Occult Terminators are the ones who have the rapid fire. But again, you have to be at 12 inches, so you have to pack a 10-man unit at 12 inches. That was always kind of the struggle there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, no, you're right. At range, if you're just firing down range, these guys are honestly, it's not bad. They're the same as Terminators, basically. That's not bad. Okay, we got to keep it moving here. The Predators, honestly,
It's a predator.
it's a Predator.
Uh, Coastal Destruction is kind of neat, I guess. Yeah, because it improves the strength and armor penetration by 1. So effectively, just you tag a model with the Psyker early in the
Hmm.
shooting phase, and it you get extra strength and armor. It's not bad.
I really hate that they exclude Doombolt from this
Ha,
because I feel
should
like that's unnecessary. The vehicles aren't that great to begin with, that they need to be restricted and held back like that. But yeah, I think you see these guys in vehicle detachments, but outside of that, I just don't think they're that
Oh
great.
no, I agree.
Yeah. Same with the Annihilator with the las cannons. I mean, all right, look, I think there's a case to be made with the las cannon Predator in a situation where you're in a meta where you have tons of vehicles or tons of heavy tanks, and you can just go all in on the anti-tank. Then I think you can start selling the premise of the Annihilator. Their points are pretty good. I think they're around 130, 120, 130 points for the different variants here. And you can sell me on that. But outside of that, that's not the norm right now. I think the norm right now is just really tough infantry, elite infantry, basically. And they're not good at I mean, you're an
Hmm.
Annihilator is not good into it.
Yeah, though it should be noted that the Annihilators in Sorcerer Annihilation is different than the
It's much better.
Destructor. Yeah, because you get to
It's
reroll
much better. Yeah.
hit rolls and damage rolls.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is it makes sense since you're
But
rolling
not
the last
wound
cannon.
but not wound rolls. That kind of
Right.
sucks. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'd rather have that than I would the strength and armor penetration, to be honest.
Yeah. No, it's a solid tank buster, but again, unless you're running the armor detachment, not really great.
Yep.
It's a
The Rhino.
Rhino.
Yeah, the Rhino is the Rhino still. They have now done something similar to what they were doing with Chaos Space Marines, where now if the Rhino basically shoots something, uh, you get to have the unit that had disembarked from it also get +1 to hit and wound against that unit. I think that's great.
Yeah.
They forgot something very important on here. There's no firing deck. They did it again. They did this at the beginning of the index where everybody else got firing deck and Thousand Suns did not. So I'm hoping that that's just an oversight and they put the firing deck back on the Rhino like it should be. But we'll just keep our
Yeah.
fingers crossed, I guess, on that. But yeah. Otherwise, there's nothing really that it's a
It
Rhino.
holds, hey, it holds 12 models now, not 10. You can finally put a character with them. They fixed it.
Yeah.
Uh, that's small
Yeah.
wins.
Although I think they've actually in recent I think they fixed that recently too. I
Yeah,
think
I
that was one of
wouldn't be
the other things
surprised.
they yeah.
But
Um the Land Raider.
they cut off the picture of the Vindicator.
Yeah, the Vindicator actually in the leaks we're looking at was not included really. They didn't get a full page of it. There's nothing changed. The reality is
Yeah.
it's the exact same before. It can shoot when it's in close combat. It has the same profiles as it had before. There's nothing special that's changed on there. And that actually is the same exact thing with the Land Raider. It's still overpriced for what it does. And honestly, you can't really make use of the Land Raider that much, I think. Although I think with -1 to wound on Terminators all the time, you could make the theory that I can put 5 Terminators in there with a um, leader, and then that's 12, and then I get a
It
couple extra spots, I guess. But
yeah, it has one it has enough for 7 Terminators.
yeah, it's such an odd number to have
That's kind of
7.
weird. 12 I get.
Yeah,
14's kind of strange.
yeah. If you could put 10 Terminators in the Land Raider, that would be awesome. But Land
Well,
Raiders, I think, are just not. I mean, aside from the Land Raider Redeemer because of Overwatch, I just think there's
not
better ways to spend 270 points.
yeah. I mean, Land Raiders have always been in kind of a strange spot because either they're entirely too oppressive or they just are kind of lame. And the Hellbrute.
The old Derp Brute. All right. So his ability before was awful because he was refunding Cabal points when you used a spell. Now his ability is that he just battle shocks a unit essentially in the shooting phase or fight phase when he hits when after he's fought them.
Yeah, subtracting one
And
from the
if
test if within
yeah,
that of
yeah,
a
if
thousand
if
sun
there's a
psyker.
psyker, yeah, it's okay. I honestly just don't think the battle shock abilities are all that great. The things that make units battle shock,
I mean,
you
the
can use
problem.
them. Yeah,
Well, so one, you can. There's a stratagem to just say, "No, I'm not doing that." But two, it's swingy. You can't rely on it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you couldn't look at it and go, okay, I have to take control of this objective and I have to rely on that ability to go do it. I'm probably not going to be able to get it done. They're probably going to pass their battle shock. Everything's battle shock ability or their leaderships are so high that even at -1, it's not that big of a deal. But it's not to say that the thing is insignificant. It is an ability that's there. You could make some use out of it. I just don't think people really load up on it. I think the Hellbrute's 110 points. 5 up invuln is okay. 2 up saves okay. I don't know. I'll say this. Lately, I have been playing Eldar, and I have been using a couple Wraith Lords to hold my points. Wraith Lords are 140 points. They have a little bit more shooting than the Hellbrute does, but they do not have the 5-up invuln. I have not felt like I need the 5-up invuln. Um, I feel like the
Yeah.
Hellbrute could probably do that same role in Thousand Suns. It rhymes with what I'm using the Wraith Lords for. Um, it's not as tough. I think it's T9 versus T10 on the Wraith Lords. 2-up
Hmm.
save, not as many wounds, I don't think, and not as much OC, I don't think. I think the Wraith Lords are OC4. But all that said and done, I feel like there's value there if you really want to use Hellbrutes. Their movement is back up to 8 inches, not from 6, which is good. I just don't. I'm not getting wowed. Like I'm not getting sold that hey, this is something I really wanna. I want to make sure I have one of these in the unit or in the army.
Yeah. Though, if you're running the vehicle detachment, it is a vehicle.
It is a
Give it.
vehicle.
Yep.
Yeah. Forge Fiend stays the same, except the Hades autocannon is now AP2 from where it was AP1. Everything else is pretty much the same on there. Good unit. This is probably one of our better vehicles. I think
Yeah.
if you want to take a vehicle for anti-tank or just in general have a vehicle in your list, the Forge Fiend is what you take. Mauler Fiend. He gets to heroic for free. Pretty much the same as what he was before. Yeah,
Yep.
same thing. I just don't see a purpose for him in the army. Like, why would you take a Mauler Fiend over a Mutalith? Okay, the points, sure, but you're not talking you're talking a difference of maybe 20 points or so. I think Mutalists are like 160 and these guys are like 140. So 20 points or in that vicinity, that's not a deal breaker. And the Mutalist just shoots a lot better, does a lot more for the rest of the army. And the Mauler Fiend just doesn't. Again, you taking the vehicle list, I get it. That's probably your only case for really taking it.
Yeah. I mean, the role that they seem to be trying to give the Mauler Fiend is as this like it's like pseudo bodyguard unit where he gets to like
Right.
reroll charges if he's charged into a combat with other Thousand Suns, and
Mm-hmm.
you got the free heroic intervention, even if you've already used it on different thing. But
What he really needs is he needs the ability where like when you charge, he should get like a free tank shock.
yeah, something
Like
like that.
that's what he should be getting. But,
Yeah.
Defiler does get a bit of an enhancement. I do think Defilers, I'll say this, we'll get into why, but I do think Defilers are actually probably worth a consideration in some lists. Uh, First of all, they have a feel no pain now. Great on a T10 14 wound vehicle. Yeah, 6-up feel no pain is not something to just ignore. It's something. Uh, it can also, do the same thing it did before, where it can just basically, walk over stuff as long as it's not taller than 4. And then it now gets to Overwatch on 4s as long as you have a psyker within 9 inches, which is actually really funny. Uh, he has enough stuff loaded out. Like he has a ton of weapons on him. He's got the Defiler cannon obviously is the strength 10 flat 3 damage cannon. You can put something like a Reaper auto cannon on there or las cannons. You can put flamers. He has enough shooting on him to make that actually kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
not
he's
getting again, I'm not getting wowed by this, but I'm also kind of like, I actually am starting to see a way I could use a model like this
yeah. It's definitely an improvement over the last time I looked at the Defiler. It
for sure.
honestly, I think that the Defiler does what the Mauler Fiend wants to do way better with its destroyer or future abilities.
I think I totally agree with you. The Helldrake will pretty much just
I
skip
mean,
over because
it's a flyer.
Eric,
It's not good in this edition. It's very sad.
Aircraft are in timeout. Yep. So we'll just kind of move on. Chaos spawns. So we're into the mutants now. So we've gone through the Thousand Suns and the Marine units that are the Chaos Space Marine-ish units, and we're now into the mutant units. So, like I said, Chaos spawns, Zangor Enlightened, Mutalith, those are all your mutants. Chaos spawn basically remains the same as before. 4 up, 5 up Invuln, 5 up Feel No Pain, which is really, really good, especially when you consider in the Zangor detachment, you can deal mortal wounds to get +1 to wound or B -1 to wound. So just saying, T5 at -1 to wound, and most things are wounding you on 6s. That's, I mean, most infantry, anti-infantry type stuff is wounding you on 6s. That's really, really good.
Yeah, it's
Um,
actually shockingly good for what you're paying for these
yeah.
guys.
Yeah, they're what, 60 points, 65 points for 2 of them?
Yeah. My one complaint is that they're locked in at two. You always have two. If
You
you could
only
just
can
like
take two. Yep, you
two
cannot get above two
four
anymore.
or 1 4, that'd be
Yep.
awesome.
And they improved the healing, so it's not D3 anymore. It's just
Yeah,
flat
just
three. They
flat
just
three.
heal up flat three, which
Yep.
is, I have no complaints about that.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
If you fail to kill it, it's the full health.
The Zangor Shamans, honestly, they retain their +1 to hit, but they lose the Feel No Pain ability. I think the Feel No Pain ability is what really set them over the top in the index. That's what was making me take them with Zangors. Now, not really too excited about it. You
Yeah.
get the +1 to hit, and the other one is just this weird. Um,
Well, you can trade effectively. You can kill off one Zengor to add a D3 attacks and strength to its psychic attacks. So either its ranged attack or its force staff,
yeah,
which
I'm not.
it, it's all right, I guess, but it's not
I don't
great.
know if it's worth killing Zangors. Like, I don't feel like you're gonna. I think I'd rather keep the bodies, basically.
Maybe, but I mean, it's the only model that can natively lead Zengor units, like regular Zengors,
Yeah,
not enlightened. So you probably, if you're running the warp meld, you're taking a couple of these guys.
yeah, because Zangors hit on 4s naturally, right? So you want them to
Yeah,
hit on 3s. Yeah, I get you. So they split Zangor Enlightened into 2 data sheets, one for the bows, one for the spears. The ones for the spears, not bad. And they're both 50 and 80 for their points. So you're taking 50 or 3 for 50, 6 for 80. Honestly, I'll tell you what, taking 6 of either of these units is a hell of a bargain for what you're getting. They're 2 wounds apiece, they're T4. You have a 5 up invuln on them, which is great, and they're OC2. These guys are just great mission play pieces in your army. The spears are very cool because they have like a mini tank shock. You just basically charge them into engagement range and then do mortal wounds to stuff. And then what's great is you have lance, precision, and they are now flat damage too in combat, which I think is just that's all they needed. They are in the perfect spot now. I really want to run a bunch of them. Honestly, I have no problem with what they've done with the spear and light. I think they're great.
yeah. It's, I mean, it's a pretty solid loadout.
The bow enlightened, I think, are even better. Same
Yeah,
price point, and their bows are 2 attacks apiece, ignoring cover with lethal hits and precision and damage 2 and AP 2. That is incredible. Incredible. This unit, I think, is honestly possibly the best sniper unit in the game. At 30 inches for their range, they can basically just roam around the board and chuck arrows at anything they want that's in a unit. And it's enough damage and it's enough AP. You're probably on stuff's invuln, and it's enough attacks and enough hits and enough wounds at strength 5 that I mean, this thing is it. You can't ignore these guys. They will kill your characters.
yeah. I will say the one thing that the Zengor Enlightened with Fate Caster Great Bows are lacking compared to like a traditional sniper unit
Mm-hmm.
is they don't have some sort of stealth mechanic. to make them
Mm,
harder to kill at range. But they do have malign trickery, which means that once per turn, when an enemy unit ends a normal advance or fallback within 9, as long as you're not in locked engagement range, they can move a
yep.
d6. So potentially you could like bounce them like out of line of
Yep.
sight in response to enemy movement.
Yep. I
I
think
do
the
think
only, yeah, go ahead.
you are going to want to run a Zingor Shaman with at least the Enlightened, just to make sure that they're hitting more reliably, because
Yeah.
like other Zingors, they hit on fours.
And lethal hits, right? So
Yeah,
at the end of the day, the +1 to hit from the Sangor Shaman is gonna affect that. But um you want to get as much through as you can. And when you couple lethal hits with it, like there's already going to be a good chunk that you don't have to worry about rolling to wound. You want to get as many other hits through that give you a chance to wound on something, because they're about getting wounds through and then just saying good luck, right? They're not
yeah,
about, hey, these are really scary dev wounds that we're putting on you that you have nothing you can do about. It's like just deal with a bunch of saves and oh look, your character's dead. I'm surprised.
yeah,
But I think you're right, and I'm okay with them being, for the price point of 50 and 80. I'm okay with them being kind of like glass cannons, basically. I think
yeah.
that's a fair trade-off. Zangors. So I think we mentioned they have the uppy downy ability now. So as long as they're 6 inches away from any enemy units at the end of your opponent's turn, they can pick up and jump into strategic reserves and come in the next turn if they want to. Uh, Honestly, amazing. That is a piece in the unit in the army. I think you're going to at least have two of these in every list that you have, no matter what list you're taking, what detachment you're playing, because they are self-sufficient. They are mission pieces. They can go anywhere on the board. They give you the ability to take 10 Zangors, jump them on the next turn if you need behind enemy lines or something like that. And honestly, that is worth every point that they are priced at. I think they're at a 65 points or 60 points a model or 70 points a model right now, or sorry, not a model, 70 points a unit right now.
For
Uh,
10. Yeah,
I think that's worth it. That seems
yeah.
about right.
Plus, they have scouts, so they get to make an advanced move.
Yep.
Uh, and so looking at their weapons loadouts, if for the first time since as long as Zengors have been in 40K, I would actually consider the chainsword loadout for them because it
Hmm.
gives them an extra attack at strength 4 instead of strength 5.
And the blades are not
And
AP1 anymore.
the
I
blades are an
didn't
AP1.
catch.
And
Yeah.
if you're going to be deep striking and not able to charge some of the time, having an auto pistol just to spit in somebody's face the turn you come in is actually worthwhile. I mean, obviously, you're still taking the Brayhorn and the Herd Banner because they're free and they're awesome.
Yeah.
But I think that the auto pistol chainsword loadout is actually competitive for once.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's if you, and let's say, let's go all the way back up to the beginning of the codex here and look at the Cabal rules. And I'm curious about Twist of Fate. Each time a Thousand Suns model makes an attack, it improves the AP by 1. So in theory, Mike, in the mutant detachment, you could take a unit of Zangors and let's say it's something like a giant Chaos Knight or a giant Knight, and you do Twist of Fate on that. You could take all your chain swords and hilariously just take D3 mortal wounds on your unit of Zangors. And okay, just roll the dice. And now you are actually potentially having your Zangors chop down a knight. If it's got enough
Yeah,
wounds that have been not by themselves. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you've already done Twist of Fate. You've done a bunch of AP. You've shot it. It's almost dead. You charge your Zangors into it. They actually would be wounding on fives. And if it's a, what is this? They get +1 to lead. That's not a big deal. Yeah. So I mean, okay, you're wounding on fives. You're getting some stuff through, but it's AP1. So you're taking a knight from a 3 to 4 up save. Honestly,
yeah. Or if you
hilarious.
roll good, it could be AP -2.
It could be AP -2. Yep. So now you've got AP2 chain swords on them. Uh,
Yeah,
I mean, that's
it's that.
if the unit survives, like, okay, you're taking at least one mortal wound for the +1 to wound. So I mean, that's you're talking 27.
Yeah, that's
Chainsword
got some bite
attacks?
to it.
Not the I mean, dumbest thing I've ever thought about, but
No,
I
I
mean,
think that it's worth consideration.
yeah. I think you're right too on the pistols. I think the chainswords, the fact that they lost the 1 to AP. I'll say this though, Mike. Here's here's one of the differences. At 5, with their detachment ability, you're wounding Marines on 2s.
True.
That's really good. Wounding Marines on 2s with Zangors is freaking good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mutalith, thankfully, remains practically unchanged aside from the fact that you trade out his extend range ability for +1 to psychic tests within 6 inches of him. Everything else remains the same. He's fantastic. I think he'll be in a bunch of lists. Anything to
Yeah.
add? Yeah.
No, he's very solid.
Okay, we're into the demons. Kairos is the first demon that we can take. He is the only model that we have access to that actually, I believe, gives us a CP generation. So he takes a leadership test at the beginning of the turn, gains a CP. I think if you are taking the demon detachment, you must have Kairos in your list, simply for the fact that he gives you command points
Yeah, he actually has two different things that give command
and one to
points.
also reduce them by 1 as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because he also each time your opponent
Or sorry,
uh
increase your
targets.
opponent's ones. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting set of abilities there, and obviously he's got all sorts of crazy psychic attacks.
Hmm.
Uh, Definitely
Yep.
very solid.
Yeah, I think he's about like 270, I think, and the Lord of Change is 260. Lord of Change basically remains pretty much the same. You can basically for his shooting, you can basically get ignore, cover, lethal, and sustained, or sustained
Yeah,
for bolt to change, which I think that's the exact same thing that he has today. Um, he gives +1 to strength to demons around him. Yeah, I, I think I think if you're taking a Lord of Change, you're taking it for an enhancement.
yeah. I mean,
You
to
know,
me, looking at the demon detachment, uh, if you're running that, you really do need to take at least one Lord of Change to get the full like benefit from it.
yeah. So
Just
maybe you're taking a Lord of Change in Kairos.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Flamers pretty much they are what they are. They're fast. They have flamers
Yep, we like
and they
flamers.
can yeah, flamers. Screamers, I think, are probably the most interesting out of everything because they have the anti-monster, anti-vehicle 4 plus. They're fast. If you couple the reroll, well, sorry, can't do that. You don't get to have the Cabal rituals as part of it. But if you could, it would be really, really great. Not amazing, but great because they're hitting on 4s, re-rolling, potentially everything to hit. That would be great. But
Yeah,
we're not allowed to have great things, I guess. So.
they still have the ability to deal a smattering of mortal
Mm-hmm.
wounds.
Mm-hmm.
14 inches of movement is they could potentially do that
Yeah.
pretty easily.
Yeah.
Uh,
And they're beasts, so they can go through walls. I think that's one of their big things there, and they get a 4 up in bone. But
yeah, and they
you
fly,
know,
so you can't really screen them out. Uh,
yep, yep. Pink horrors, I think, are going to be the real winner here, but that's always because of their points, right?
yeah,
So nothing to really write home about any of their abilities, really. They are T3 with 1 wound apiece. They have a 4 up invul. That's their key, the 4 imp invul. But then
hmm,
they are also then becoming blue horrors, and then the blue horrors are becoming brimstones, and so on and so forth. Um, Again, nothing to write home about them. It always comes down to the points for pink horrors. At 115 points for a unit of 10, when you consider the fact that you also get blues, then you also get brimstones, worth a look. Don't know if it's good. I don't know whether that's the right price point for him yet or not. And then blue horror, same thing. I think the other thing is blue horrors, I think, are more expensive than the robots still. I think the blue horrors are about 100 points or like 90 points or something like that. Um, if you're gonna, they have infiltrate. If you're going to, um, if you're gonna run blue horrors, I guess I could see a world where you infiltrate a bunch of blue horrors and a bunch of vehicles, and you put, in certain types of games, maybe teams matchups, things like that. You're very one-sided to be, hyper aggressive with your army. I could see trying to play something like that, but at the end of the day, I think the vehicles outshine the blue horrors here for infiltrating. Um, just based on the fact that they do the same thing basically for about the same amount of points or less. And I'd rather have the robots than the blue horse. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I I
It,
don't know.
it's kind of like bottom of the barrel stuff. It's kind of like I'm not excited about either, really. But
Yeah, I mean,
and that's it.
if I'm running the scintillating detachment, then I would take the blue horrors over the robots.
Hmm.
But that's mostly just because that's the theme of the detachment. You might be able to get something out of them, uh,
Yeah.
or they'll just die turn one because you've got what 10 models to 4 up safe
Yeah.
and 1 wound each.
Well, that's it. I mean, we've
Yeah,
actually made it through the codex. And I think we were talking about this at the beginning. I think, honestly, I think the struggle I see right now is that it's going to be very difficult to build a competitive list with any of the detachments at the moment. But maybe I'm
yeah,
proven wrong over time. I think all of them look fun. I think if you just want to play some casual games and put your army on the table and run them around and roll some dice and kind of cast some rituals, it'll
yeah.
do
I
that.
think there are, we have the option with these new detachments and unit abilities to play some very like cagey lists where you're not necessarily looking to like fight fair, but you sort of the idea is to either outmaneuver them because like the Zengor list, you just get to pull units of Zengors and put them back down where it's
Mhm.
strategically advantageous. Or you have this like a wrecking ball in the form of like Magnus, and he has his infiltrating robots that help like screen off areas of the battlefield early on.
Yeah.
Um, I I'm fairly confident that somebody is going to surprise some people and win big with this eventually. But one of the things that
Mm.
it's actually, I would say it's as the codexes have come out, it's becoming increasingly difficult to call ahead of time. This is the thing
Yeah.
because depending on which detachment you pick, it completely changes how the codex interacts with the other codexes. Um,
And
there's more variables now.
it's worth mentioning the fact that we're weeks away from the new mission pack too.
Right.
So to try and say what's good now is going to be good in a few weeks is not the case.
Yeah, I
Um,
do think that the as much as it's like my favorite because it's like classic Thousand Suns, I think the Rubrique Phalanx is probably the weakest of the detachments. Not because it doesn't have great defensive tools or have great offensive tools, it has no built-in mobility. So you're
and at the
either
end of the day, they're marine bodies, right?
right,
And that's what you're loading up on.
right.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas at least the Warpmeld and the Warpforged all those other detachments, they have things that allow you to quickly redeploy some part of your army
Mm.
uh, to be able to react like
Mid
reflexively
game,
to mid
right?
game to
Yeah,
as the sort of things change.
yeah.
Um, and that's I feel like one thing Games Workshop has in many ways done a good job on in the most recent years of mission packs is not rewarding static gameplay. And so you sort of have to be able to do all
Right.
the stuff you've had to do traditionally. Like you need to be able to deal damage, take damage, hold objectives. but because like we're going back to the decks, for instance, for your
Yeah.
mission packs, being able to react to, okay, well, I need to have a unit on this side of the table, like right now, and I'm out of position. How can I do that? Having something to let you do that, like the
Yep.
Umbelithic Crystal or units that can just go back into reserve, is going to be the thing you want to have.
Yep.
Otherwise, you wind up, well, weird situations where, okay, so this unit, I can't do anything with it this turn, but next turn I might draw an objective. So I'm going to put it like in a weird position where it could go after like these two objectives. And if you draw those two, that's great. But if you don't, well, now you've wasted that unit's entire potential for the turn. And,
Yep.
well, what do you do with it at that point?
Yep. That's fair.
Um, so the game is in an interesting spot at the moment. I think that individually, armies are in a better position than they've been in a long time, and that every codex that's come out, it has at least one competitive build, but everything is very like fluffy and fits like the the the, the narrative of the army, which is good. But I think that the what the narrative of certain armies are is better than other armies. And for Thousand Sons, we've always been in this weird spot where we're Marines, but we're Psychers, and which direction we lean into is determines the sort of the feel of the army. I like the change that they've made from the Cabal points to the Cabal sorcerers because it feels more psychery, at least from my understanding of what that means, than uh, we've been for a while. But I do think that I would have done sort of what they did to Eldar last codex. Not the current one, the one before this, where we had the fate dice. Where, okay, so at this points value, you get this many fate dice. At this points value, you get this many fate dice. Where instead of just having, okay, you have these four, you can use each of them once per turn, unless you're running the Grand Coven, in which case you can double up on one of them. You say that, okay, so at 1,000 points, you can use each of these once. And then once you've used all four, okay, well, now at 2,000 points, you can do them again. Because you're still, like,
Yeah.
there's risk involved with using them. They're powerful, they're the core mechanic of our army. And just don't want to run into this situation where, well, I've used all four, and only like a tiny subject, like only the guys over on this side of the table are having any benefit.
Yeah.
Whereas it should be a good army rule is one that you sort of feel the effects sort of equally across the army.
Yeah. I think when you consider some of the restrictions that are on things, it's like overly restrictive for a lot of the abilities. Um, even like the oath ability, if you think about it, like Marines get to just basically pick anything on the table, whether they can see it or not. And then then it's up to them to get into range to actually see and shoot and attack it. Uh, the other thing with psychic powers having to be, not having to be line of sight now for all of them, even the defensive ones, is kind of unfortunate. And I also think it's unfortunate that two of the or three of the psychic powers are offensive and only one of them is defensive. And I wished when they built or designed this codex that they had done more to make each detachment more flavorful for the psychic powers themselves. And that maybe what you did is you said, okay, here's five or here's like three core psychic powers that every army has. And then each detachment had like three psychic powers that were unique to it. So it was like a 50-50 kind of thing. Or
Yeah,
whatever way you want to do it. Maybe there's a unique one per detachment. But I think you could have done something a little bit more along that lines where you get a unique psychic power that fits that detachment and what it does, which would make everybody get a little bit more participation. So I think what we're headed for, to be honest, is looking at what's here and looking at the struggle a lot of people are having putting together lists and looking at some of the games I've seen people play already and the results that have happened already with this new set of rules. I think we're going to find that the new rules are fun, but I think they are going to be behind the curve. We are in a window of time here where the new mission set is about to drop, and there will not be any games played with the new codex at any major events that are factored into the balancing of the army until July when the US Open Tacoma happens. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to have a window where everybody gets their list ready. They play in Tacoma with the new missions. And unless there's some big shakeup in the new mission set, I think what ends up happening is the army is shown to be behind the curve. They were pretty, in my opinion, they were pretty generous with the points and that they did a good job of trying to reduce the points for a lot of stuff. And I do think there's going to be whether it's a MFM or a balanced data slate that happens this summer, there's something to adjust the points for everybody across the board based on what the results have been lately. I don't know whether we're going to get anything immediately. I think we get the immediate codex update. But then after that, I think we're waiting. And I think we're headed for a situation similar to AdMech, where yes, the army could be fielded and you could compete with it, but you're capped, right? You're held back by it. And then I
Right.
think we're potentially in a situation where GW revisits it and revisits the wording or the way these detachments work essentially to make the army more viable. I'm hoping that's the case. What I see, I think, is just not for the longevity of 10th edition and into next year into 11th edition, if this is the codex we're sitting with through the next edition. I'm not feeling great. I'll just be honest. I think it's weak. I just don't think it has the tools to compete with some of the other things that armies are able to do right now. But we'll
Yeah,
see.
we will see.
Well, I will say one thing. I know that Magnus did nothing wrong.
I mean, obviously, everyone who listens to this podcast knows that. Magnus would never have done anything wrong. So it's all Space Wolf's fault.
It is all the Space Wolves' fault, and they're about to get a new codex, and
They
I'm
are.
entirely unhappy about that. But
I hope the Space Wolf guys have the same conversation that we just had about. Well, it's all fluffy, but like,
yeah,
is this really what we wanted?
we'll keep our
Uh,
fingers crossed.
yep.
All right.